What if I told you that some abandoned churches don't just sit empty, they hold on to something that lingers long after the last sermon, long after the congregation is gone, and long after the doors were locked for the final time. These aren't just ruins, they're places locals avoid, explorers fear, and historians struggle to explain. St Marys Church, now this is in Clopihill, England, and this is the desecrated parish. Now, hidden on a very lonely hill in Bedfordshire, the 14th century St Marys Church was abandoned in 1848, and it quickly fell into ruin. But its real story begins in 1963 when grave robbers broke into the churchyard and actually dug up a coffin, placing human bones inside the church in what appeared to be an occult ritual. Now, police described it as one of the worst cases of cemetery desecration the region had ever seen, and it honestly did not stop there. More graves were violated in 1969 and again in 1975, feeding all these rumors that the ruins were being used for satanic gatherings. Now, since then, locals have reported strange lights flickering around the church tower, hooded figures standing amongst the tombstones, and a very eerie coldness that kind of hangs over the site, even in the summer. I mean, it's one of the few abandoned churches in England where villagers openly warn visitors just not to go there after dark, because whatever moved in after the parish moved out, well, it still hasn't left. St George's Church, this is in Lakova in the Czech Republic. Now, this is the ghost congregation. Deep in this very tiny village of Lakova stands a 14th century church, and it has a very tragic history. In 1968, during a funeral service, the roof just suddenly collapsed. I mean, it was out of nowhere. Now, luckily, taking the lives of no one, but terrifying the congregation enough that they actually just never returned ever. Now, for decades, the church just rotted, stripped of its furniture, and vandalized beyond recognition. But then in 2012, artist Jacob Hadrava installed more than 30 life-size plaster ghosts seated in the pews, which is really creepy when you think about it. Hooded figures draped in white cloth, and it's meant to represent the kind of Sudeten German parishioners expelled from the region after World War II. Now, since then, visitors swear that the statues actually shift. Sometimes they say they lean, and some people even say they tilt their heads between visits. Now, some claim they hear faint murmuring or even soft footsteps echoing behind them, even though the church is completely empty. Now, one tourist passed out after thinking one of the ghostly figures actually breathed on him. Now, whether it's just, the uncanny sculptures or the weight of the church's history, literally almost everyone who enters this church, they say the exact same thing. This place, it feels occupied. St Etienne Church in France. Now, this is the church that refused to just go away quietly. St Etienne le Vieux in Cayenne dates back to the 13th century, and honestly, it survived centuries of conflict until World War II. Now, during the Battle of Seine, a shell tore through the roof, and the once proud church was left gutted by fire and bomb damage. Now, instead of, rebuilding it, the city decided to actually leave the church abandoned as a war relic. But locals say something else stayed behind. Passersby have reported, hearing what sounds like chanting coming from inside, even though the church literally has no roof. Others have claimed to see a single light glowing in, kind of the dark of the night, despite there being no electricity in the ruin at all. Now, during restoration surveys, workers actually refused to go into the basement after hearing footsteps following them in the dark. So today, tourists stay, or they say standing inside the broken, nave of the church feels like being watched from above, almost as if the souls taken during the battle, maybe they never really left the sanctuary where they sought refuge. So if you ever go, let me know what you hear. The Holy Trinity Church, this is in Chirac region in Armenia. Now, this is the church that was lost to the earthquake. Now, in the village of Patskaven stands the remains of the 19th century Holy Trinity Church. This is a place that was, once the heart of the community. Now, in 1988, Armenia was struck by the catastrophic earthquake, destroying literally thousands of buildings, homes, lives, and it included this church. Its dome collapsed almost instantly, unaliving several villagers who had run inside for shelter. They thought it would be safe there. They thought this was a safe spot, but it wasn't. The site was abandoned and left exactly as it fell. Prayer books still half buried in the rubble, icons shattered on the floor, candles frozen mid-melt. I mean, locals say the church is restless. Shepherds passing by report hearing sobbing coming from beneath the collapsed stonework, and some actually claim shadowy figures move along the broken walls at sunset. I mean, to this day, residents avoid it because, they say the church holds the spirits of those who passed away inside. And, they don't like to be disturbed, and I don't blame them. St. Paul's Presbyterian Church, now this is actually in Newfoundland, Canada, and they call it the church that still echoes. Now, on the coast of Newfoundland sits the abandoned St. Paul's Presbyterian Church. It was actually built in the early 1900s, and it was deserted after, the fishing community around it kind of just dwindled away. The church was left to the harsh Atlantic weather, windows shattered by storms, roofs eaten by salt winds, but locals say the building just never truly went silent. Fishermen claim they've heard the church bell ring kind of during heavy fog, even though the bell was actually removed all the way back in the 1970s. Some explorers report hearing, singing from inside, but the moment they step through the door, the entire building goes absolutely silent and quiet. Now, one group found every pew pushed to the side of the sanctuary as if someone or maybe something had made a path down the center aisle. Now, the church has no caretaker, no congregation, no official visitors, but sounds still echo inside it every single night. And no one can actually explain why. Churches like these were meant to hold peace, but instead, they hold memories, tragedies, and in some cases, something far, far darker. Centralia, Pennsylvania, a place where the fire still burns beneath the streets. Imagine waking up one morning to find the ground literally cracking open beneath your feet, smoke pouring from sinkholes, carbon monoxide creeping into your basement. Well, that's what happened in Centralia, Pennsylvania, a quiet coal town until 1962 when a fire accidentally ignited an underground coal seam. They thought it'd burn out in a few days, but it didn't. That fire is still burning today, over 60 years later. The roads warped, houses were swallowed by the earth. By the 1980s, people were ordered to evacuate. Today, graffiti-covered Route 61, known as Graffiti Highway, is the only clue left of a town once home to over 1,000 people. And some who return say they've heard voices in the smoke. It's definitely a creepy place to visit, but if you go, come back and let me know your experience. Dudleytown, Connecticut, the village that drives people insane. Locals call it the Village of the Damned. Now, Dudleytown, nestled in the so-called Dark Entry Forest, was once a small settlement in the 1700s, but then everything went wrong. Settlers went insane. People unalived themselves, lightning strikes, entire families just kind of going off. Now, even those who visited would suffer misfortune afterward. Rumors say the Dudley family brought a curse over from England, a punishment for betraying the monarchy. Today, the forest has completely consumed the town, and police guard it 24/7 to keep people away. Visitors who sneak in report a suffocating silence, whispering voices, and sudden nausea. It's literally a town so haunted that no one is allowed to visit, so stay away or don't. Times Beach, Missouri, poisoned by its own roads. In the early 1980s, a strange sickness swept through Times Beach, Missouri. Children developed rashes, pets passed away mysteriously, people were collapsing. The cause? Well, the roads. From 1972 to 1976, the city had paid a waste hauler to spray used oil on the roads to keep dust down. That oil contained dioxin, one of the deadliest chemicals known to man. In 1983, the CDC stepped in and ordered a full evacuation. The entire town was bulldozed. Over 2,000 people lost their homes. Now it's a ghostly shell buried under a thick forest, except for the road to nowhere, still cracked and stained with poison. So if you're thinking of visiting, it's highly advised that you don't. Cairo, Illinois, a town choked by hatred. Now, what happens when a town implodes under the weight of its own racism and corruption? You get Caroy, Illinois. Once a thriving port city, Cairo was known for its grand mansions and busy downtown, but during the civil rights era, racist tensions exploded. Assassinations, riots, a years-long boycott that basically gutted the economy. And then came the corruption, police brutality, disappearing funds, fires that just mysteriously consumed buildings. People began to flee. Now today, Cairo looks frozen in time. Storefronts rot behind broken windows. Entire streets sit empty. It's a town haunted not by ghosts, but by the consequences of its own history. Bodie, California, a place where even ghosts got the heck out of there. The Wild West was violent, but Bodie was next level. In the 1880s, it was a booming gold town with over 10,000 residents, but it had a very dark reputation. Slayings were daily events, saloon brawls turned absolutely lethal. People simply just disappeared. One little girl famously wrote in her diary, "Goodbye God, I'm going to Bodie." Now by the 1940s, it was totally abandoned. Locals say anyone who tries to take anything from Bodie, even a rock, is cursed. The Park Service still receives mailed back items with apology letters saying they've suffered accidents, demises, and even bankruptcies. Kennecott, Alaska, frozen in time, literally. Deep in the Alaskan wilderness lies a perfectly preserved town. Homes fully furnished, school books still on desks, clothes hanging in closets, but there's literally not a soul in sight. This is Kennecott, once the richest copper mine in the world. In the 1900s, it was booming, but when the copper dried up, the entire town shut down literally overnight. There were no send-offs, no goodbyes, just silence. Now today, it's only accessible by a very long, dangerous road. Visitors report a heavy atmosphere, like they're being watched by someone or something. And some say they even hear footsteps echoing through the empty mill. Gilman, Colorado, evacuated by the EPA. Gilman sits high in the Rocky Mountains, but don't let the stunning view fool you. What's buried beneath is very toxic. Now founded in the 1800s or 1880s, it thrived on mining silver, zinc, and lead. But in the 1980s, the EPA discovered that, mine waste had contaminated the groundwater with arsenic like sulfuric acid and other poisons. So the entire town was basically condemned and evacuated. Residents were forced out by 1984. Now the homes actually still stand, many with furniture and belongings just simply untouched, but it's actually illegal to go inside. The pollution is still that dangerous. And locals say that at night you can actually hear mining carts rattling down tracks that haven't moved in 40 years. So safe to say it's probably haunted. Thurman, West Virginia, the town the railroad left behind. Thurman was a railroad boom town full of life in the early 1900s. It had banks, hotels, even casinos, but it was also built on one thing, coal. When the railway shifted to diesel and the coal industry crashed, the town then shriveled up. By 1950, it was nearly empty. The post office didn't close until 1995, with only 5 residents left. Today, you can walk its tracks and peek into buildings locked in time. It feels like the whole town is just waiting for something or someone to return. Some ghost hunters swear it already has. Riolet, Nevada, millionaire's mirage. Now at its peak, Riolet had electricity before New York City. It had concrete sidewalks, an opera house, and even a stock exchange, but it all vanished in just 5 short years. The gold rush here was a mirage. The mine failed, banks collapsed, and people fled in groups, but some say the land was cursed long before settlers arrived. This sacred, land was never meant to be disturbed. Now today, only the skeletons of buildings remain, including a house made of 50,000 beer bottles. Now the silence there is overwhelming. Visitors report sudden dizziness, nausea, and an eerie sense that they're being followed. Last on my list for you today, I have Elkmont, Tennessee, where the Smokies swallowed a town. Now deep inside the Great Smoky Mountains lies the ghost town of Elkmont. Now once a logging camp, it became a luxurious getaway for the wealthy. Think Victorian cabins, fancy lodges, swing dancing under the stars. But in the 1990s, the National Park Service forced the last residents out and reclaimed the land. We don't know why. Now the park let nature take over. Vines now crawl through the cabins, porches collapsed under moss. And the strangest part though, some visitors report hearing old-time music at night, swing tunes kind of drifting through the trees, except with nobody around. These real stories of real demons living inside these abandoned hospitals will absolutely terrify you, for real. The Linda Vista Community Hospital, located in Los Angeles, California. Linda Vista Community Hospital is a former hospital located at 610 30 South Street, St. Louis Street in Los Angeles, California. Now it's in the Boyle Heights neighborhood. The hospital hospital was originally constructed for employees of the Santa Fe Railroad and called the Santa Fe Coastlines Hospital. Now, the hospital gained notoriety as one of America's most haunted hospitals, originally treating gang violence victims in the 1970s and 1980s. The hospital closed in 1991. After its closure, the hospital became a very popular filming location for productions, including films, TV shows, and music videos. It has also become the subject of several paranormal investigations. Now, the hospital was sold in 2011 and converted into a low-income senior living facility called Hollenbach Terrace in 2015. Linda Vista Community Hospital is widely known for its alleged hauntings. Many visitors have reported hearing footsteps, moaning, and groaning even after the hospital was closed down. Some claim to have seen shadowy figures moving around the premises, especially in the emergency rooms. Now, a ghostly figure resembling a doctor pacing the corridors has been reported by some investigators, and a pacing young woman on the third floor, as well as the spirit of an orderly still making his rounds. Now, one person actually shared their story from a visit and said, "We were live streaming at 2:03 a.m. in the pediatric wing of Linda Vista when our camera picked up a shadow crawling along the ceiling. No footsteps, no noise, just this thing that kind of slithered like it had no bones. When we reviewed the footage later, we caught what looked like a face, red eyes, very sharp cheekbones, staring straight into the lens. None of us saw it in real time, but all three cameras did." That's terrifying. The Bielitz-Heilstatten Hospital in Brandenburg, Germany. Now, the Bielitz-Heilstatten Hospital, located near Berlin, is actually known for its eerie atmosphere in association with historical figures, aka the bad guys. While some claim it's haunted, others say the ghostly reputation actually stems from the abandoned state and the echoes of the past. Now, the hospital's history includes use as a sanatorium, a place for war officials, and later a Soviet army hospital. Now, Bielitz-Heilstatten was a large hospital complex with a very long history, including periods of a tuberculosis sanatorium and location for notable figures, and the building's abandoned state and the stories surrounding its past have contributed to a sense of unease and a claim of it just being haunted. Now, Bielitz has a reputation for its wild World War II era history and neurological experiments. Now, there's a local legend of a ghost named Schleicher von Bielitz, hope I'm pronouncing that right, who is said to have roamed the halls in the late 90s as well as the early 2000s, deterring vandals and misbehaving kids. Now, this legend adds to the overall eerie atmosphere of the site. One person actually shared a story on Reddit and said, "What we caught on tape was something deeper. In the surgical ward, we heard knocking from behind sealed walls. The knocks turned into scratching, then into a very deep, growling voice that simply said, 'Bleib,' which is German for stay. So we left. The audio file, well, it got corrupted that night." That's creepy, right? I'm glad they didn't follow orders and they did decide to leave, because that's one thing you won't ever need me to do. I'll be gone faster than you can blink, so believe that. Now, some sections of the hospital are still used for neurological rehabilitation as well as Parkinson's research, and it has also been used as a film set for movies like The Pianist as well as Valkyrie. Now, visitors can access the site and there are tours available, so let me know if you ever visit. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. Now, this National Historic Landmark served as a sanctuary for the mentally ill in the mid-1800s. This 160-year-old asylum holds very fascinating stories. It includes Civil War raids and also a gold robbery. There are also stories about the curative effects of architecture. Now, the efforts of determined individuals helped better the lives of the mentally ill. Now, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, now widely considered one of the most haunted destinations in America, it actually operated from 1864 all the way to 1994. Although it was designed for 250 patients, about 2,400 were actually crammed in there, and they were treated very poorly. Now, ghost hunts of this massive building run year-round, and one person shared their experience there. He said when he visited for a tour, he expected to be joined by, hardcore paranormal investigators, kind of weighed down with camera gear and digital recorders, but it wasn't like that at all. He said, we broke into smaller groups, spending 2 hours on each of the asylum's 4 floors before rotating. Our tour guide told us about some of the hospital's better known spirits spirits, including a little girl named Lily who was born in the asylum, a man named Jesse who actually passed away of a heart attack in a bathtub, Civil War soldiers, as well as a patient who was kind of unalived brutally by his roommates. Now, he said the hospital is so vast that it was easy to end up alone despite, the dozens of other people wandering around. It was also easy to feel lost amid the maze of hallways and patient rooms, covered in peeling paint. He said, we were filming a kind of lights out challenge inside the women's ward. He said at 3:14 a.m., a camera set up in the hallway caught a figure walking backwards in complete silence. When we tried to enhance the image, its face blurred like static, but the eyes, pure black, stayed very clear. Now, paranormal experts later told them that what they saw was a shadow parasite. He continued to say by 4:30 a.m., he's like, I was ready to go. He said, as I drove away, I thought about whether I actually believed what I saw. He said, I've always been fascinated by ghosts, but am I convinced they exist? Honestly, not sure. There's actually a lot of stories from this hospital, so search it up on Google if you're intrigued. The Rolling Hills Asylum in East Bethany, New York. Now, one of the most haunted locations in the whole of United States. It was established in 1827. The Rolling Hills Asylum, or the Genesee County Poorhouse, which was originally a working farm, soon became a refuge for some of society's less fortunate. So widows and orphans mingled with the mentally ill, and the unclaimed passed on were actually buried on the property. With over 1,700 documented demises and hundreds not recorded, it's no wonder, Haunted North America rated it as the second most haunted site in the United States. Often resembling a reformatory, a poorhouse often housed orphan children, families, destitute elderly, physically handicapped, mentally unstable, morally corrupt, even criminals. Now, these institutions were situated on the grounds of a poor farm on which, able-bodied residents were actually required to work. Such farms were, actually very common in the United States in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Now, a poorhouse was a government-run facility for the support and housing of dependent or just needy persons, typically run by a local government entity such as, a county or a municipality. Now, institutions of this nature were widespread in the United States prior to the adoption of the Social Security program in the 1930s. Residents were referred to as inmates, no matter, why they were housed there, and those physically able-bodied would have to work the farm, and many actually built and made wares to sell, to help offset some of their living expenses. Now, the raising of Holstein's pigs, draft horses, chickens, and ducks, raising vegetable and fruit crops, canning jams, jellies, meats, that was all part of their chores. One visitor shared their visitation story online and said, I was standing in the solitary confinement corridor when a deafening scream erupted from the far end. The problem? Well, that hallway had caved in years ago, but the camera caught the scream echoing, bouncing unnaturally as if it came from inside our own equipment. The audio waveform even shows a second, much deeper voice overlapping the scream, like something was inside of her. Well, as creepy as that is, I bet some of you would still like to visit, am I right? Well, there's an upcoming event on June 4th. It's about 5 hours and it costs about $600. So if you've got the nerve, the time, and the money, check it out and thank me later. The old Chattahoochee State Hospital. Patients swore they saw faceless figures crawling along the walls at night. Nurses whispered of children crying in empty wards, and even decades after the hospital's closure, trespassers have come out pale, shaken, and swearing they heard voices in the halls. The Chattahoochee State Hospital, also known as Florida State Hospital, was once considered progressive when it opened in the 19th century, but by the 20th century it gained a reputation as one of the darkest psychiatric facilities in the South. Reports surfaced of overcrowding so severe that patients were crammed into filthy rooms, chained to beds, or locked away in padded cells. Electroshock therapy and lobotomies were used regularly. Thousands of patients lived, and many passed away inside its walls. When parts of the hospital were finally shut down, the silence was worse than the chaos. Paranormal investigators say the atmosphere is crushing, like the building itself wants you gone. Cold spots move through the halls, even in the Florida heat, and voices whisper help and leave on EVP recordings. The underground tunnels, once used to discreetly transport patients, are considered the most terrifying. People who step inside describe overwhelming nausea, headaches, and in some cases, scratches appearing on their skin. Former staff have admitted that they themselves refuse to enter certain wards alone, even in broad daylight. Shadowy shadowy figures crossing hallways, objects moving on their own, and the constant feeling of being followed are so common that even skeptics walk out uneasy. Would you visit this place? Let me know. The Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables. Now, firearm explosives rang out on the 13th floor of the Biltmore Hotel in 1929, and a mobster named Thomas Fatty Walsh ran out on the expensive carpet. Ever since, guests claim his ghost never left. Doors slam with no explanation, glasses clink in empty bars, and his shadowy figure has been seen in mirrors. The Biltmore wasn't just a hotel for Florida's elite. During World War II, it was converted into a military hospital. The luxurious ballrooms turned into operating rooms where young soldiers passed away on red liquid-stained floors. Now, after the war, the Biltmore went through years of abandonment. By the 1960s and 70s, its windows were shattered, the once grand lobby sat rotting, and graffiti marked the walls. But visitors claim the glamour hadn't faded entirely because the ghosts kept the hotel alive. Those who entered illegally during its abandoned years described chandeliers swaying violently despite still air, stretchers rolling across dark hallways, and even phantom footsteps echoing down marble staircases. The sounds, of firearms going off are believed to be the echoes of Walsh's assassination, and they were reported so often that even local police stopped investigating. Some said the elevators would move on their own, opening to reveal no one, but reeking of cigar smoke, which was Walsh's signature scent. Now, when the Biltmore was eventually restored and reopened, the hauntings actually continued. Guests still check out early, saying they can't shake the feeling of being watched. Staff members admit that some rooms are harder to rent than others because of how often guests complain about seeing figures standing at the edge of the bed. That's terrifying. The Devil's School in Jacksonville. Now, they call it the Devil's School for a reason. Teens dared each other to break inside only to come running out screaming. Stories spread of a headless janitor who still roams the halls, children's screams echoing from the burned out basement, and satanic rituals performed inside the gymnasium. The real name of the school was Annie Lytle Elementary, built in 1917. Now, when it first opened, it was a proud, grand building with arched windows and a reputation as one of Jacksonville's most impressive schools. But by the 1960s, it had fallen into disrepair. Now, the neighborhood deteriorated, attendance dropped, and eventually the school was just shuttered. Now, once the children were gone, that's when the legends began. Locals whispered about satanic cults meeting there, and graffiti of, pentagrams and strange symbols appeared overnight. Homeless squatters claimed they were chased out by unseen forces. Fires broke out inside with no explanation at all, leading some to believe the building itself was just cursed. Paranormal investigators captured EVP recordings of children's laughter and cries for help despite the building being empty for decades. Urban explorers describe a sense of just suffocation the moment they step inside. Now, the windows are shattered, trees grow through cracks in the roof, and the smell of mold mixes with something more metallic, something like dried red liquid. Now, cameras malfunction regularly, batteries drain instantly, and even seasoned ghost hunters refuse to enter the basement, where the atmosphere is said to be just completely unbearable. Now, some say the spirits are the children who once studied there, trapped by tragedy. Others insist something darker moved in, maybe after their abandonment. Either way, the Devil's School has earned its reputation, clearly, as one of Florida's most haunted ruins. The Dozier School for Boys. Now, few abandoned places in Florida carry a history as horrifying as the Dozier School for Boys. Now, survivors describe it as a nightmare of attacks, torment, and demise. And when the truth was uncovered, investigators found nearly 100 bodies buried in hidden graves there. The school operated for more than 100 years in Marianna, Florida. It was actually meant to be a reform school, a place where troubled boys could be rehabilitated. Instead, it became infamous for brutal, attacks, forced labor, and very cruel punishments. Former students, describe being taken to a small white building known as the White House, where guards whipped them until, they were leaking, of red liquid, which we know what that is. Sometimes until they actually lost consciousness. Now, some boys never came out at all. When the state finally investigated in the 2000s, they discovered a secret graveyard. Dozens of unmarked graves held the remains of boys who had disappeared. Many were never identified, their families never told the truth, so we don't know who these boys are. Today, the school remains, it stands as one of the darkest abandoned places in not only Florida, but all of America. Paranormal reports are overwhelming, disembodied voices, chains dragging across the ground, and cries in the distance. Some visitors claim they've been touched or even grabbed by invisible hands. EVP recordings capture chilling words like help and stop and please don't leave. Even skeptics admit the site feels very cursed. Investigators describe heavy, very oppressive air that grows worse near that whole, White House building. Cameras often pick up orbs as well, streaks of light and shadows moving where no one is even standing. Survivors say it doesn't surprise them. The boys who passed away there never got any justice at all. So of course, their spirits may still be crying out for help. Stiltsville in Biscayne Bay. Now, in the middle of Biscayne Bay, 7 ghostly houses balance on wooden stilts above the water. Once, they were actually alive with illegal gambling, wild parties, and mafia connections, which sounds kind of fun, right? Not really. Today, they're silent ruins. Locals say the ghosts of Stiltsville haven't left. They're still there partying in the dark. Maybe we should go check it out. Stiltsville began in the 1930s as a hidden playground for the wealthy and the rich. Now, rumors spread of high-stakes poker games, secret deals, but also very violent disputes that ended, in you know what. By the 1950s, Stiltsville had grown into a thriving offshore village known as much for its lawlessness as its exclusivity. But nature had other plans, of course. Hurricanes repeatedly battered the houses, sweeping many into the sea, and by the 1990s, only a handful remained. Today, the skeletal remains of those houses rise eerily out of the bay. You can see them. Fishermen report strange lights flickering in the windows, even though no electricity runs through them at all. Boaters hear music drifting across the waves, jazz and swing tunes from an era long gone. They're still partying there. Some claim they've seen figures standing on the docks kind of waving, only to vanish as the boat draws closer. Paranormal investigators believe the energy of Stiltsville comes from the combination of its violent past and its watery graveyard of ruined homes. Some boats have reported being, chased down by glowing lights at night, as if something is still kind of guarding the bay there. The location is remote and isolated, which of course only adds to its ghostly aura. To this day, few dare to explore the houses after dark. Abandoned places hiding deep-rooted evil secrets are so spooky, you may want to watch this with a light on. Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, USA. This penitentiary is often described as a scary and haunted place, both for its dark history and reported paranormal activity. It's known for its creepy atmosphere and unsettling history of brutal punishments and solitary confinement. Many visitors and paranormal investigators have reported experiencing strange occurrences, including ghostly sightings, unexplained noises, and feelings of unease. Once the world's most expensive prison from 1829, this Philadelphia facility boasted grand architecture, modern luxuries, and notorious inmates, including Al Capone. One of the first penitentiaries ever built, it combined impressive design and strict discipline to inspire regret and reform in the hearts of convicts. It's also known for its harsh and often cruel treatments of inmates, including solitary confinement, physical punishments, their mad chair, and psychological torment. Since its closure in 1971, the complex has crumbled into a mass of deteriorating cell blocks, which are now recognized as a National Historic Landmark. Eastern State Penitentiary is open to visitors year-round, so go check it out if you want. Lee Plaza Hotel in Detroit, USA. A staggering 60% of the city's peak population has now moved away, leaving behind a living example of urban decay. Its vacant state and history contribute to its reputation for being eerie and potentially really scary. The formerly luxurious Lee Plaza Hotel stands windowless and exposed. It is just one of Detroit's many abandoned places that mark the shocking decline of a major American city. Once at the center of a booming motor industry, the successive blows of economic recessions, competition from overseas, and race riots chipped away at Detroit's early prosperity. Winchester Mystery House in California California, USA, a number of employees and a few visitors claim to have crossed paths with Clyde, a mustache man sometimes seen pushing a wheelbarrow in the basement or trying to repair the fireplace in the ballroom. Then there are the gentle tugs of shirts or skirts during tours, and the report from longtime maintenance worker Denny. It's safe to say this place is really haunted. Although damaged in the 1906 earthquake, the house is open to visitors who can actually explore the 160 surviving rooms. Eccentric and extravagant, this Victorian mansion in California is a maze of dead ends, secret doorways, and stairs that lead literally nowhere. Driven by paranoia and superstition, Sarah Winchester, widow of William Winchester, began building in 1884 and ordered that construction should never cease. In the 38 years until her passing, the residence mushroomed into a labyrinth of architectural oddities, 7 stories high. Bodie Ghost Town in California, USA, visitors and park rangers have reported seeing ghostly figures, hearing disembodied voices, and experiencing really other strange occurrences. Settled by prosecutors lured by the California gold rush in the mid-1800s, Bodie became a booming mining town of fortune-hungry men, saloon shootouts, and brawls. Now, its fortune was short-lived, however, and by the 1890s, gold strikes elsewhere had drawn the crowds away, causing the population to dwindle. Now, frozen in time, this ghost town became a national historical landmark in the 1960s. Now, tourists, not miners, flock here to walk the deserted streets and admire the town's arrested decline. Verosha, Cyprus, now an urban museum of corroding classic cars, destroyed high-rise hotels, and shop fronts boasting the latest in 1970s fashion for the deserted Verosha quarter in Famagusta City. Time froze in 1974. Now, following the Turkish invasion of Cyprus, Verosha's inhabitants were forced into a life of exile. Verosha has become a destination for very dark tourism, attracting visitors interested in exploring places with a somber or very tragic history, further contributing to its reputation as a place with a strong atmosphere. Once a favorite destination of the rich and the famous, people today can only peep through barbed wire as nature reclaims all of the buildings. Raijang Hotel in Pyongyang, now unoccupied, unopened, and never finished, and often called the Hotel of Doom or the Ghost Hotel due to its unfinished stay and eerie appearance. This 105-story shell of the Raijang Hotel is a scar on Pyongyang's skyline and North Korea's pride. Construction on the hotel began in 1987, but stopped after 5 years due to just a lack of funds. Once proudly, emblazoned across North Korean stamps, this vacant hotel soon became airbrushed out of official photos. The Raijang was intended to be a symbol of North Korea's strength and architectural, prowess. Its failure to materialize as a functioning hotel has made it a symbol of the country's economic struggles and isolation. The hotel's imposing presence and mysterious history have led to it being featured in numerous articles, documentaries, even online discussions, fueling speculation and contributing to its haunted aura. Now, despite nearly 2 decades of abandonment, construction actually resumed in 2008, but whether the hotel will ever be completed is open to debate. San Juan, Michoacan in Mexico, beginning in 1943, successive eruptions of the Paracutan volcano slowly engulfed houses, streets, and livelihoods, masking all signs of life under a black cloak of molten rock and ash, leaving behind ruins, particularly the church, partially buried in lava and ash. Now, defiantly protruding from a desolate landscape of ash and lava, this church tower is all that remains of the devastated village of San Juan. Now, this makes it a site of historical interest and a stark reminder of nature's power, attracting visitors who find it both awe-inspiring and melancholic. Now, today, tourists drawn to this isolated ruin can marvel at the still intact, though vacant, altar inside. Now, the desolate and surreal landscape, combined with the story of a town buried by a volcano, evokes a sense of just melancholy and wonder and a little bit of haunted. Kalyazin, Russia, now boldly rising 75 meters above the waterline, the bell tower of the flooded St. Nicholas Church marks the site where the Russian town of Kalyazin once stood. When the Ulik Reservoir was created in 1939, the town was, purposely flooded and the landscape was irreplaceably altered. Now, attracting attracted to the simplistic beauty of the remaining, landmark, tourists visiting on boats can actually explore this enduring landmark of the sunken town, although many believe it is cursed and haunted, so they stay away just to be safe. ZKP Tagansky in Moscow, Russia. Now, since its declassification in 1995, Bunker 42 has drawn many visitors keen to delve into the secrets of the past. Some people who have visited find the bunker's dark underground environment and historical context has created a sense of unease or even eeriness, and many people have claimed to have felt a very off-putting presence that they can't seem to explain. Hidden 60 meters below the streets of Moscow lies, the ZKP Tagansky, also known again as Bunker 42. Now, it is a former Soviet secret military facility in Moscow and a 7,000 square meter space which once served as a secret Cold War's era communication center. Now, built in the 1950s, this vast complex was designed to withstand a direct nuclear attack and filled with enough supplies to stay running for months afterwards. Presidio Modelo in Cuba. Presidio Modelo in Cuba is known for its very harsh history as a prison, particularly during its use in the 1950s. The prison, with its panopticon design, housed many political prisoners, including Fidel Castro and his brother Raul. Empty since 1967, this prison still radiates desperation and paranoia. Commissioned in 1926 by dictator Gerardo Machado and inspired, by this model, its oppressive architecture and designed to create a sense of constant invisible monitoring. Even though Fidel Castro was once an inmate here, under Castro's government, the prison's population ballooned to over 6,000 enemies of the state. Now, museum visitors can experience the forbidding atmosphere still present in these echoing corridors and vacant cells. There are some places you don't just explore, not unless you're prepared to find what was never meant to be seen again. These are real stories of what's been discovered inside abandoned prisons, where silence hangs heavier than the crimes that were committed within them. And what's left behind is more terrifying than the inmates ever were. So let's dive into 5 of the most disturbing real-life finds inside abandoned prisons. The Old Sparky Electric Chair Room in West Virginia's Penitentiary. Now, when urban explorers snuck into the long-abandoned West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville, they, didn't expect to walk into a scene that looked like a horror film in progress. In a forgotten basement chamber once used for executions, they found the original electric chair, known chillingly as Old Sparky, and it was still bolted to the floor. But what made them flee in terror wasn't actually the chair itself. No, it was actually what surrounded it. The walls were stained with dried splatters, and the floor was visibly discolored with a brownish red. So, you can easily imagine what that is, right? Now, a forensic technician later confirmed that it was remnants of red liquid in human tissue. Now, apparently the room had been hastily sealed off in the 1980s after a botched execution that caused an inmate's head to catch fire, reportedly spraying tissue right onto the ceiling. Now, talk about absolutely terrifying, right? Despite being closed to the public, some visitors have claimed hearing faint buzzing sounds and screams coming from the sealed room where standing outside the door. Now, this is an urban legend. You can actually find documentation of the 1951 botched execution in local West Virginia archives, and Old Sparky is still viewable today during controlled historical tours, minus the grotesque, gruesome evidence. So if you happen to go pay a visit, please come back to us. Let us know how that went for you. The mummified body living at the El Paraiso prison in Peru. Imagine filming your next viral exploration video and stepping over what looks like just another pile of, tattered blankets. That is until the camera light catches something leathery beneath it, and you realize you're actually looking at a human face. That's what happened in 2018 when explorers entered the ruins of El Paraiso prison near Lima, Peru. Now hidden in a solitary confinement cell, completely cut off from sunlight, they found a fully mummified human body. The corpse was still wearing tattered prisoner, kind of garments and shackles around one of their ankles. But here's what makes this truly disturbing. There were no official records of any passings in that part of the prison. None at all, not one single document. So how was it there? Well, autopsy specialists dated the body back at least 40 years, and the man had seemingly passed away curled in the fetal position with his hands covering his face. The door had been locked from the outside, meaning he wouldn't have been able to get out just completely. I mean, the thought of his body kind of curled up in the fetal position as its final way of passing is honestly heartbreaking and not really an image I want to think about for much longer, so let's move on. Anyway, authorities believe this man may have been forgotten during a very chaotic prison riot in the 1980s and was left to starve, which would make sense, right? Or worse, he was deliberately locked up as a form of extra punishment, which again, both very bad. The Hidden Journal of a Cannibal, located in Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. Now, tucked behind a false wall in an abandoned cell in Eastern State Penitentiary, a construction crew stumbled upon something in 1999 that still freaks people out. An old metal box with a handwritten journal inside of it. It was water damaged, of course, but what was, legible was, well, let's just say, for lack of better words, shocking. The journal belonged to a long passed away inmate named William D. William was imprisoned for multiple assassinations in the early 1900s. Entries were deeply disturbing, like extremely disturbing, nightmare-worthy type of entries. He wrote, in horrifying detail I might add, about his obsession with human flesh. One passage actually read, "The taste is no longer strange, the hunger is no longer shameful." I'm sorry, what? That is giving one episode in TWD where they came across the cannibals. He described in very strong details hallucinations of devouring fellow inmates whole, like real vor type stuff. But one early entry suggested that it might not have been just fantasy. He wrote, "They never found the bones in the yard. I buried what I couldn't finish." To this day, no official investigation has confirmed whether William actually consumed anyone, but it seems like he did, and shortly after the journal was uncovered, cadaver dogs were brought to the site and reportedly alerted to a patch of soil behind the east yard wall. Now, excavation was halted almost immediately due to budget constraints, and the area remains unsearched. But what? I'm just really confused, because why was it cut because of budget cuts? Why in the world would you stop searching after a literal search dog led you to a spot you absolutely should be searching? I need it to make sense, please. Now, do these families not deserve to know what happened or properly lay their people to rest? I don't know. It's really giving like Tubi budget. The Wall That Bleeds, H.H. Holmes' abandoned prison cell. This is in Moyam Singh Prison in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's got a lot going on there. Hear me out and stay with me, because this one sounds fake until you realize how many witnesses saw it. So when serial executioner H.H. Holmes, who was often called America's first true SK, was imprisoned in Philadelphia's Moyam Singh Prison in the 1890s, he was reportedly terrified during his final weeks. Not of actually passing away, but of his life ending. No, it was something he said was inside of the walls. Now, fast forward to the 1950s, decades after Holmes was kind of strung up to his demise, his cell was sealed off and largely forgotten. But in 1957, a guard doing rounds swore he saw red liquid dripping from the wall beneath Holmes' cell. Maintenance investigated this, thinking it was just old plumbing or whatever, but what they found was a very thick, dark red substance seeping directly out of the concrete. So yeah, what in the world could that be? Duh. Anyway, multiple guards witnessed this. Samples were taken. The lab results, the substance tested positive for human red liquid proteins, with no logical explanation for how it even got there. No buried bodies, no animal remains nearby, just literal BLOOD. What's even stranger is that Holmes's body was exhumed in 2017 and was found almost perfectly preserved in cement. The screaming tapes in the Goliad prison ruins in Texas. Now, in 2005, a group of amateur ghost hunters visited the remains of Goliad prison in Texas, armed with nothing more more than a few camcorders and old tape recorders. Now, they expected to capture orbs, maybe some muffled EVPs, but what they captured instead has never been explained. After exploring for several hours, the team left feeling like the visit had been very uneventful, but when they played back the tapes, something horrifying emerged. Beneath their normal conversation and footsteps, a very low, guttural screaming could be heard. Not just one voice, like dozens. It sounded like men being like tormented. Very horrifying distortion. Now, audio specialists reviewed the tapes and confirmed there were no technical malfunctions, no radio interference, and crucially, nothing was heard at the time. Now, the screams only appeared during playback. Further research revealed that Goliath had been used in the 1800s to imprison and execute Texan revolutionaries, many of whom were burned alive or, basically just sent to their demise without trial. Now, legend says the screams of those still echo and that anyone who stays in the lower cell block past midnight hears them without any recording equipment even needed. The tapes have never been made public, but, screen grabs of the footage and audio waveforms have surfaced online. One of the investigators reportedly stopped speaking entirely after reviewing the full audio and checked himself into a psychiatric clinic days later. Pripyat Amusement Park in Ukraine. Now, if there is one abandoned amusement park that feels like the world pressed pause right before disaster, it's the one in Pripyat. Now, the infamous Ferris wheel was supposed to be open for the very first time the day after the Chernobyl nuclear explosion, but the city was evacuated in a panic and the rides never had a chance to spin. Today, the entire park stands exactly as it was left. Ferris wheel cabins frozen in midair, bumper cars still parked as if waiting for the next round, rust eating through everything. But the weird part isn't what you see, it's what you feel. Visitors describe an atmosphere that is unnervingly heavy. Sound doesn't travel normally here, almost like the air itself is thick. Some people report the distant sound of creaking metal when the Ferris wheel moves slightly in the wind. Others claim they've heard faint echoes that resemble children laughing, even though the city has been empty for almost 4 decades. Radiation monitors sometimes spike unexpectedly near the rides. Some explorers have sworn they saw a figure standing behind one of the bumper cars or movement in the windows of nearby abandoned buildings, only for it to vanish the moment they tried to look directly at it. The park is more than abandoned. It feels like a memorial frozen in time, a place suspended in its final moment. Spree Park in Berlin, Germany. The Ferris wheel at Berlin's abandoned Spree Park doesn't just stand abandoned, it moves. When the wind is strong enough, the entire wheel slowly turns on its own, creaking loudly through the forest that's grown up around it. And that sound, that's exactly what draws ghost hunters and explorers from around the world. Spree Park opened in 1969 and was once packed with families, rides, food stands, even elaborate themed sections. After the Berlin Wall fell, things changed fast. The park hit financial trouble, went bankrupt, and even shut down. But the strange part came after. The former owner, in desperation, used old amusement rides to smuggle narcotics across borders. Yes, actual amusement rides stuffed with illegal cargo. That bizarre criminal twist added a very dark lore to an already eerie place. After the park closed, nature took over aggressively. Roller coaster tracks are now tangled in vines, paddle boats sit half buried in swampy water, and animatronic dinosaurs lie collapsed like ancient fossils. Explorers often describe hearing footsteps behind them or feeling watched from inside broken ride buildings. Some even claim to hear faint carnival music at night. Music the park hasn't played in decades, so Spree Park doesn't feel empty. It feels alert. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park in West Virginia. Now, before Lake Shawnee was an amusement park, the land was the site of a violent clash between settlers and the Shawnee tribe, a conflict that left several children deceased. When the park was built decades later, tragedy struck all over again. The people began wondering if the land itself was just cursed. From the 1920s to the 1960s, Lake Shawnee was a buzzing local attraction, but the demises didn't stop. A little girl in a pink dress passed away on the swing ride after a truck backed into it while she was still riding. 2 more children actually drowned in the park's swimming area. After multiple tragedies, the park shut down and people started asking questions. Today, the swing still stands and the Ferris wheel still towers above the trees, but the energy around them, completely unexplainable. Ghost hunters and investigators have called Lake Shawnee one of the most active paranormal sites in America. People report seeing a little girl in a pink dress near the swings. Some have captured EVPs of children laughing or crying. Others feel set in cold patches of air even in the middle of summer, and some explorers say they feel like they're being followed. Every ride seems to have a story, every inch of ground feels haunted by history and heartbreak. Holy Land USA in Connecticut. Now this one isn't your typical amusement park. Holy Land USA was a massive biblical themed attraction built in the 1950s, complete with miniature cities, altars, statues, and recreations of stories from the Bible. It once drew crowds of over 40,000 people a year. But when the creator passed away in the 1980s, the park was left to rot. What once felt holy now feels unsettling in a way that's kind of hard to describe. Miniature stone villages lie crumbling under overgrown, vines. Statues of angels and prophets stand cracked, decayed, and leaning at unnatural angles. I mean, the giant cross overlooking the property casts a very long shadow across pathways no one has walked in decades. Locals say the place becomes, terrifying at night. Explorers have reported hearing footsteps on gravel when no one is there. Some claim to have heard whispering near broken down altars. A few describe the feeling of being watched constantly, especially when walking through the miniature Jerusalem ruins. The energy isn't chaotic like other parks, it's quiet, but very heavy. It feels like something sacred was disturbed, and whatever is left behind doesn't want company at all. An assassination occurred on the grounds in 2010, deepening the park's unsettling reputation. Some believe the land absorbed the violence and that it kind of stirred something dark. Okpo Land in South Korea. Okpo Land is the kind of urban legend that turned out to be real, and what happened there is the stuff of nightmares. In the 1990s, Okpo Land was a very colorful, family-friendly amusement park, but one ride became infamous, a duck-shaped roller coaster. Rumor says a young girl passed away after a cart derailed. Whether the exact details were covered up or distorted over time, the fact remains several accidents happened, and one of them involved a child. Instead of shutting the ride permanently, the park reportedly kept operating. That decision turned Okpo Land into a cautionary tale and a very haunting one. When the park finally closed in 1999, workers simply just walked away. They didn't pack up rides, they didn't store equipment, they didn't even remove the derailed cart where the accident happened. Everything was just left exactly as it was, frozen in a moment of terror. Explorers who visited before it was demolished described eerie children's laughter echoing through the empty park. Some claimed the duck ride still made squeaking noises at random times, and others felt watched by something they just could not explain. Even though the park was eventually torn down, the legend of Okpo Land refuses to pass on. I mean, people say the spirits of the children who lost their lives there still remain, and that the land itself carries the memory of tragedy. So these abandoned amusement parks aren't just rotting tourist destinations, they're time capsules of tragedy, sorrow, and unresolved stories. When we see a Ferris wheel frozen in place, or a rusting roller coaster, or swings rocking in the wind with no one near them, it becomes impossible not to feel something watching. These parks remind us that the line between joy and horror is razor thin. A place to design, or was designed to create laughter, can just as easily trap it, echo it, twist it into something very unsettling. And even though these parks are empty, they never truly feel alone. The New Amsterdam Theater. This is the ghost in green. Now, she appeared in the still of the night, a woman in a shimmering green beaded gown gliding across the floor into darkness. Now, she was blowing a kiss and vanishing through a wall. That's what a night guard claimed he saw in the long abandoned New Amsterdam Theater located in New York City. Now, the New Amsterdam Theater opened in 1903 as a Broadway jewel, but by the 1980s, it lay in ruins. Now, mushrooms grew on the walls, water flooded the floors, and the once golden ceilings rotted away and rusted. During restoration, in the 1990s, when the theater was nothing but a decaying shell, workers and guards began to see her, a glamorous figure carrying a small blue bottle. Many believe this is Olive Thomas, a Ziegfeld girl who passed away very tragically in Paris in 1920 after accidentally ingesting mercury bichloride. Now, the guard who reported her said she walked across the stage and actually just disappeared through a solid wall. When police searched, they found no one, but he quit days later because he was so terrified of the incident. Now, over the years, others have actually claimed to have seen her as well. Sometimes, curtains stir with no wind, footsteps are echoing through empty dressing rooms, and her figure appears in mirrors only to then vanish once approached. Now, the restoration uncovered hidden corridors, trap doors as well, and even bricked off rooms that were, long forgotten. Caretakers reported very cold spots in kind of, their old private duplex there where strange artifacts once sat. One said he actually heard chains rattling in a defunct elevator shaft, though that lift had been sealed decades earlier. Now, some staff believe Olive is playful, blowing kisses at actors and appearing during opening nights as if to bless or possibly curse a show. Bangor Opera House. Now, this is the firefighter and the little girl. Now, in Bangor, Maine, actors say they've seen a shadowy figure lurking in the balcony, even though no one should actually be there. Now, the Penobscot Theatre Company, which operates out of the old Bangor Opera House site, is believed to actually be haunted by more than one restless spirit. Some allege maybe even as close to 10 or 20. The original opera house actually burned down to the ground in 1914, and legend actually has it and says that a firefighter passed away in that particular blaze. Now, his spirit is said to haunt the new building, pacing dark hallways at night and watching performances from the shadows. During one show, an actor actually said he noticed a figure in the upper balcony where no one was supposed to be seated at all, so that's spooky. Now, when they looked again after looking away, that spirit was then gone, of course. Now, backstage performers, tell of footsteps in empty hallways, doors locking and then unlocking on their own and being slammed shut, sinks turning the water on and off, and whispering voices calling out their names. One actress felt her costume kind of tug sharply, though she was alone in the dressing room. No one else was there, so who did it? Others have seen a young girl in a white dress wandering the corridors as well. Some actually describe her as transparent, gliding silently before fading away. Now, a group once said that they used a Ouija board in the theater and claimed they contacted both the firefighter and the little girl. The mix of protective and unsettling energy has left performers very uneasy. Some don't even want to be there. They say every time they step on stage, they actually wonder who's really watching them from the dark. Theatre Royal. This is in Drury Lane, and this is the story of the man in gray and the hidden bones. Now, during renovations back in the 1800s, skeletal remains were discovered bricked up inside a wall at London's Theatre Royal in Drury Lane. Now, ever since, actors and actresses and audiences alike have spoken of the man in gray, one of the most famous ghosts in theater history, period. Now, he appears as an 18th century nobleman in a powdered wig, a hat, a cloak, and he's walking usually from the upper circle to a royal box before just vanishing into the very wall where bones were found. Witnesses describe him carrying a sword, his face very pale but also very serious, and many performers consider him a bad omen. Now, seeing the man in gray is said to guarantee a production success also. It's a little contradicting there, but also chills even the bravest of actors, so they're scared. Drury Lane's hauntings don't stop there though. Charles Macklin, an actor who once unalived a fellow performer in an argument, is said to still wander backstage, reenacting kind of his guilt. Now, the ghost of Joseph Grimaldi, the father of modern clowning, is also reported to appear there as well, though usually kind of in a friendlier manner, which is good. Now, whispers follow staff in dark corridors, doors open and slam shut on their own, and actors just feel, sudden drops in temperature, as if someone invisible has kind of brushed past them. Now, the discovery of human remains sealed behind the wall only deepened the theater's haunted reputation, and to this day, few doubt that Drury Lane is a stage for the living and the deceased. Gaiety Theatre, this is in Zeehan, Tasmania, and this is the story of the Wailing Woman. Now, in a decaying mining town in Tasmania stands the Gaiety Theatre. Now, this is a crumbling giant, and it was once celebrated as a cultural hub and somewhere for people to go. Now, it's one of Australia's most haunted theatres ever. Locals whisper of a woman, though, who kind of wails through the night, echoing in the halls at all hours. Now, it was built in the late 1800s, and Gaiety once hosted grand performances, but it fell into ruin when the town's fortunes declined. Paranormal paranormal investigators who explore the site today report that, there's a lot of eerie phenomena, disembodied voices, moans are picked up on recording devices as well, footsteps crossing the stage, and just sudden blasts of icy air, so a lot of cold spots there. Now, one very chilling account tells of a director standing center stage when a heavy beam kind of cracked overhead. He felt a sudden shove pushing him backwards, and that was just in time to avoid being crushed, so maybe that spirit was looking out for him. Now, he insisted that something unseen, of course, saved him, and he credited that spirit to saving his life. Now, others describe a protective female energy spirit that scolds trespassers and warns them away from danger. The Wailing Woman is sometimes said to be a performer who actually allegedly passed away very tragically, or maybe a mother mourning a child lost in the mines, but some claim to see her kind of gliding through the theater at times, her cries piercing the silence, moving very slowly, and sometimes just disappearing out of nowhere. Theater tours often report malfunctioning electronics, drained camera batteries, and shadows darting across walls. So even hardened ghost hunters kind of leave this place shaken and don't really want to return. Orpheum Theater, this is in Memphis. Now, this is the ghost of Mary in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, the Orpheum Theater holds one of the most enduring ghost stories in all of America. This is the spirit of Mary, a 12-year-old girl. She's said to have passed away very tragically in the 1920s, and it's kind of debated, but she was either struck by a car or collapsed during one of her performances. It's unclear, and people kind of go back and forth on this one. But since then, her presence has been felt throughout the theater for years. Staff describe hearing a little girl's laughter, also, the patter of footsteps in empty corridors, soft voices calling from the balcony, some laughter, stuff, just whatever you would imagine a little girl doing in a theater at that time. Mary has been spotted also sitting in the audience at times, waving at performers, or just kind of drifting through the wings, which is not only distracting for the performers, but, the audience as well. Now, some describe her as very mischievous, tugging on costumes, or humming softly during rehearsals. Paranormal investigators once recorded childlike giggles and actually saw very unusual energy kind of spike on their equipment, which is all kind of linked to Mary's balcony seat. Though she isn't considered a malevolent spirit, her sudden appearances unsettle even veteran actors and, goers, people that go watch performances. Stagehands claim to feel small little cold hands tugging at their clothes. Mirrors backstage usually reflect her fleeting figure, only for it to vanish when looked at directly, of course. Now, some say Mary is tied to a forgotten accident hidden in the theater's history, which was a secret that was never fully revealed. So, whether playful or tragic, her ghost has become a big part of the Orpheum's identity. Performers often say, that she's the theater's kind of permanent audience member, watching every single show from the shadows, refusing to leave, and maybe even cheering them on. I don't know. What do you guys think?
These are abandoned hotels hiding dark paranormal secrets. Starting off this list today, we are talking about the Goldfield Hotel in Goldfield, Nevada. Back in the early 1900s, the Goldfield Hotel was the definition of luxury. There were crystal chandeliers, the furniture was mahogany, and there was this big grand staircase. But after World War II, the place shut down and it started rotting from the inside out. That's when the ghost stories started. The most talked about spirit is a woman named Elizabeth. The story goes she was involved with George Wingfield, one of the men behind the hotel. When she got pregnant, he supposedly locked her in the basement to hide the scandal. She either died down there or was left to waste away. No one knows for sure, but either way, people say she's still there today. Paranormal teams have claimed to hear her crying, and some have recorded what sounds like chains dragging across the floor. Visitors who sneak into the place will say they'll hear doors slamming by themselves, certain rooms will randomly be colder than others, and voices will be heard echoing from the empty rooms. Some also say the elevator runs on its own. Of course, there's no power though. One common story is that if you go into the basement, your flashlight will inexplicably stop working. Ghost Adventures filmed an episode there and even said they felt like something was off. The place has been gutted, vandalized, and has continued to rot over time, but somehow it's still standing. Next up, we are talking about the Ghost Hotel in Goa, India. The Sinha Hotel was supposed to be a 5-star paradise on the Goan coast. Construction started in the early 90s, but then something happened. One of the owners was allegedly killed under very mysterious circumstances, and the whole project was abandoned overnight. Since then, no one has touched it. The building sits there half finished, covered in vines and mold, slowly being swallowed by the jungle. It makes for a pretty atmospheric location, even more so because locals call it the Ghost Hotel. People claim they hear strange noises coming from it, whispers, screams, laughter, crying, even though the place is, of course, completely empty. Supposed to be, anyway. And at night, lights are sometimes seen flickering inside, even though there's no electricity. Some say they've spotted a figure standing on the top floor, and some who've tried to explore the place have ended up running out, convinced something was following them. Only there's no one ever really there. It goes beyond haunting. Some say the land itself is cursed. Construction workers who tried to restart the build reportedly quit after bizarre accidents and equipment failures. And there are rumors of people getting physically sick after spending time there. Nobody really knows what happened to the hotel's owner or why no one's ever tried to finish the project. All that's left is this concrete shell. Even during the day, the place feels off. Travelers who visit the nearby beach say the atmosphere around the building is heavy, like the air is thicker. People will warn you not to come here after dark. Next, we are talking about the Grand Laguna Hotel in Koh Chang, Thailand. Not many people even knew this place existed until a fire tore through it in early 2024, but the Grand Laguna Hotel already had a weird, unsettling reputation long before it went up in flames. It was originally a cruise ship, an actual ocean liner that someone decided to turn into a floating hotel. Pretty cool. They dragged it up onto land near Koh Chang, gutted it, and started building. Unfortunately though, the whole project was a financial mess. Construction kept stalling, apparently the funding dried up. I'm sure it's not cheap to turn a cruise ship into a hotel, but there are also rumors that there was some shady business involved. Either way, it never opened to the public. It just sat there, rusting by the jungle. But over the years, people started talking about the place because even though it was abandoned, people swore it wasn't empty. Rumors began to spread about people breaking in and never coming back out. People would say they heard screams from inside at night and that the place was crawling with spirits. At least one traveler who visited the site in the early 2000s said they found a room with melted candles, rotting food, and burn marks on the wall. It looked like someone had been doing some kind of ritual in there. Then came the fire. It started in January of 2024. There was no one officially inside, but some locals claimed they saw shadowy figures moving near the ship just before it caught. The entire thing was almost completely destroyed, with flames lighting up the night sky over Koh Chang. But even with the ship gone now, some still get unsettling vibes around the area, like it somehow left something behind. Some believe the fire didn't cleanse the place, that it just stirred up whatever was already there. Next up is what locals in Maribel, Wisconsin call Hotel Hell, and if you've ever seen it in person, it's not hard to see why. And no, there is no Gordon Ramsay lurking around. The Maribel Caves Hotel has been nothing but a hollow, broken shell for decades. But even though it's just a hollow, empty, depressing, dark, dank shell of a place with nothing left but stone walls and rubble, there is something about it that feels more than that. Something wrong, at least so they say. It was built in 1900 as a luxury spa for the wealthy, and for a while it was. People came to relax, breathe in the healing air, and escape the chaos of the early 20th century. But things started going downhill when the hotel caught fire. More than once. 3 times, actually. The final fire in 1985 ruined everything and it was never rebuilt. 3rd time's the charm, I guess. But people kept coming after it burned down. Not just for urban exploration. People were drawn to it for other reasons. Visitors started coming back with stories about eerie whispers coming from the ruins. There would be cold spots even in the middle of summer, and shapes would dart between what's left of the stone arches. Human shapes. But there was never anyone actually there. Some say you can hear footsteps walking across where floors used to be. There are also stories of lights glowing in the old tower, but you guessed it, there's no electricity. As if you needed me to tell you that. Just look at this place. And finally on our list today we have the Diplomat Hotel in Baguio City in the Philippines. Up in the hills of Baguio City in the Philippines there's an old crumbling building called the Diplomat Hotel. Looking at images of it, it clearly looks like the set for a horror movie, but those who've seen it up close and personal, it feels like walking right into a horror movie, and its history doesn't make the place any more welcoming. Originally built in 1913 by the Dominican Order, it was supposed to be a peaceful retreat for priests. That peace didn't last long. When World War II started, the Japanese took over and turned the place into something a lot darker. Locals say priests, nuns, and even young people were killed here. Many were beheaded. Story goes that on some nights you can still hear screams echoing through the halls. After the war, the building was bombed pretty badly, but it didn't stay destroyed for long. In the 1970s, a faith healer named Tony Agpaoa bought it and turned it into a hotel. He was kind of a weird guy, known for doing surgeries with no tools, just his hands. A lot of people thought there was something off about him. Wonder what gave them that idea. I'm kind of starting to see where they were coming from. When he died in the 80s, the hotel shut down, and ever since, the building's been sitting there slowly falling apart. Those who visit claim they've seen headless figures walking around. Others say they've heard chanting, crying, and doors slamming when no one else was around. A lot of folks in the city avoid the place altogether, especially at night. Even though it's abandoned, the city's trying to clean it up and turn it into a tourist spot. But no matter how much paint they slap on it, give it the landlord special, the stories haven't stopped. Locals still call it one of the most haunted spots in the Philippines.
Mysterious entities like to haunt abandoned places, and today we're here to talk about ghost towns all over the US of A and an Italian island as well. St. Elmo is a ghost town and allegedly the best preserved ghost town in all of Colorado, while also boasting the most hauntings and paranormal activity of any ghost town in the state. This town was a major gold and silver trading center and the hub of life for many pioneers, outlaws, and, well, miners for decades. Originally called Fort City, St. Elmo was settled in 1878 and became an official township in 1880. The residents of the town were actually forced to change the name because there was already too many forest cities in the area. Little fun fact. The most famous ghost out of St. Elmo is Annabelle, otherwise known as Dirty Annie Stark, a descendant of Anton and Anna Stark, who arrived in St. Elmo with the Pacific Railroad back in 1881. Anton was a section boss in the mines, while Anna ran the Home Comfort Hotel located on Poplar Street and also the general store. Both structures are still standing today, by the way. So Anna was known as a cruel and harsh woman who never allowed her 3 offspring, Roy, Tony, and Annabelle, out into the town to mingle or work alongside what she deemed the simple town folk. Annabelle grew up attractive and passionate for the town, and her love of it was fierce. After the death of her mother, Annabelle inherited the hotel, and the once impeccably clean establishment fell into shambles. Annabelle also began to lose her grip on reality. The town soon called her Dirty Annie because she would come out into the street in filthy clothing, her hair was in a tangled mess, but a lot of folks assume that now that she is free of the harsh will of her mother, this was her quiet rebellion. Residents remember her strolling the main street with her firearm loaded, hung over one shoulder, ready to protect the town from anybody who dared to threaten it. And since her passing, she is still found roaming the streets. Only a short while after she passed away, the hotel was left to a family friend whose grandchildren were playing inside the hotel when suddenly all of the doors slammed shut and the temperature dropped about 20 degrees. The people inside cried and screamed, and finally the room returned to outside temperature and the doors slowly swung open. There's other stories as well. A woman skiing down Poplar Street at dusk was struck by a peculiar sight of a lovely-looking woman in a long white gown glaring out of the second-story window of the Home Comfort Hotel. The skier was shocked. She knew that the owner of the hotel was on vacation and nobody was supposed to be allowed inside. As she turned to see what the woman was eyeing, she noticed snowmobiles approaching. Sidebar, snowmobiling is illegal in St. Elmo, so the skier went and advised the group and they were like, okay, out of here. But when she turned back to look at the hotel, the woman in the window, who was still watching, just lowered her head, nodded, and just vanished before this woman's eyes. Curious and in disbelief, the skier went back the next day to find every window and door were locked. When the owner of the hotel returned, the two women searched the property, and they couldn't find anything. So was Annabelle keeping watch? Let me know in the comments what you think. Calico was an Old West mining town that's been around since 1881. Nestled in the Mojave Desert with about 500 silver mines in the area, it took only 2 years for the town's population to reach 1,200 way back when, and by 1890 it was home to over 3,500 people. However, the dream ended pretty quickly because with the Silver Purchase Act of 1890 pushing down silver prices, everything went kaput, and by 1900 Calico was abandoned entirely. It has remained so ever since, despite several attempts to rejuvenate the place. However, just because the living have abandoned it, doesn't mean that it's uninhabited. Over the years, Calico has built up a reputation as one of the most haunted places in all of California, if not the entire United States. One of the most commonly spotted entities haunting this lovely ghost town is a woman by the name of Lucy Lane. History suggests that she ran Calico's general store alongside her husband, John Robert Lane. Lucy was well into her 90s when she finally passed, by the way. So it seems only natural that she would want to stick around in the town where she lived and died. Visitors to Calico have frequently reported seeing Lucy walking between what was once her home and the general store. She is easily recognizable by her attire, the beautiful black lace dress in which she was buried. So it would have been easy for Bannack in Montana to go the way of other ghost towns and be completely obliterated by the passage of time, but today it is a well-maintained state park that, despite its deep isolation in the Montana hills, greets thousands upon thousands of tourists every year. And while it might seem desolate and leave you feeling more alone than you have ever felt before, legend says that nobody is ever alone while wandering the weary roads of said town. The Hotel Mead has been the focal point of numerous paranormal claims and is often said to be the most haunted building in this ghost-clogged town. So one of its most famous phantom residents is Miss Dorothy Dunn. So she was once the daughter of the Hotel Mead's manager, and apparently she passed away in a pond in 1916. And since her death, she's been seen in the hotel, spotted through the windows, always wearing a blue dress. No, not Dorothy Gale. Her spirit has also been known to speak with people. So if you hear a voice and you don't see anything, just Dorothy. The island of Poveglia is located in a lagoon near Venice and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in all of Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from this island, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick to prevent the spread of disease and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. For context, in 1348, when the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poveglia, well, this little island became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed 1 out of 3 Europeans. And because Venice was like, uh-oh, we don't know what to do, they exiled a lot of their symptom-bearing citizens here. At the island center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned. This included the tens of thousands of citizens dying on the mainland. And these fires would burn once more in 1630 when the Black Death swept through the city. The small island was a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented on patients with crude lobotomies. He jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he'd been driven mad. Well, decades later, nearby residents claim to still hear the bell, although it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that in recent history some folks tried to restore some stuff on the island, but it stopped, and there's no explanation why. And finally, though closed to the public, Dead Man's Island is home to ghostly lore that is centuries old. The list of spectral sightings and strange phenomena grows by the year, ranging from loud clanging noises that ring out in the dead of the night, to hurried footsteps that pace back and forth, or the unearthly moan of a young woman's sobs that fill the air. Tales of supernatural encounters stretch back more than, well, a minute. A long time ago, it was the site of a fierce battle. I'm talking northern and southern nations that fought over claims to said island. The southern nation kidnapped 200 folks from the north, and held them captive, but when 200 young northern warriors traded themselves for the hostages' freedoms, they were cut down on the spot. In the 1860s, the government offered to sell the island to one Samuel Brighouse. He declined the offer, but one of his partners, John Morton, set out to explore the area anyways. He rode to the island, where he found hundreds of red cedar boxes scattered in amongst the foliage and perched in the upper branches of the trees, and quickly discovered they were fragile when he reached up to touch one and it crumbled above his head, showering him with the bones of its long-deceased inhabitant. Yeah, that's when you run for the hills and never look back. In the 1890s, a plague descended upon Vancouver, and this island was used as a pest house. So, if you were falling ill, you were sent here for quarantine. If you got better, you got home. If you didn't, this is the end for you. From 1899 to 1930, this island was home to a logging dispute. Local authorities and residents alike were outraged. And at 6:30 a.m. on April 24th of 1899, when the developer headed out to the island with 30 men, then Mayor James Garden brought almost the entire police force with him to the island. When the developer attempted to cut down a tree, he and his men were arrested. And there's been a lot of other incidents throughout the decades until the lease expired in 1930. In a 1909 incident, police occupied the island overnight to keep the loggers at bay, and they heard the rattling of dead men's bones and shrieking skeletons that threatened to haunt anybody who dared cut down trees on the island. Oh right, this island is home to too many bodies to count, and a lot of spirits and a lot of ghosts. For those who might not be aware of the horrors of Chernobyl, allow me to start today off with a mini sad history lesson. So the disaster was a nuclear accident that occurred on the 26th of April of 1986 at the number 4 reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near the city of Pripyat. It is one of only 2 nuclear energy accidents rated at 7, which is the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the other being the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan. The meltdown and explosions ruptured the reactor core. And destroyed the reactor building. So this was immediately followed by an open-air reactor core fire, which lasted until May 4th of 1986, during which airborne radioactive contaminants were released and deposited onto other parts of the USSR and Europe. Approximately 70% landed in Belarus, around 16 kilometers away. The fire released about the same amount of radioactive material as the initial explosion. In response to the initial accident, a 10-kilometer radius exclusion zone was created 36 hours after the accident, from which approximately 49,000 people were evacuated, primarily from Pripyat. The exclusion zone was later increased to a radius of 30 kilometers, from which an additional 68,000 people were evacuated. Following the disaster, Pripyat was abandoned and eventually replaced by the new purpose-built city of Slavutich. In July of 2019, the Ukrainian president announced that the Chernobyl site would become an official tourist attraction. Immunology experts recommend that tourists wear clothes and shoes they are comfortable with throwing away, avoid plant life, especially the depths of the forest due to the high levels of radiation. Oh, why? Oh, just because the areas were not cleaned in the aftermath of the disaster and remain highly contaminated. Research showed that fungus, moss, and mushrooms are radioactive. So among the buildings that were abandoned were multiple schools, with the small city having 15 preschools for just under 5,000 attendees. Most of the buildings in the city are practically empty, but not the schools. School books and class magazines were clearly of no value to looters, and city residents were more worried about saving at least something from their personal property, leaving the buildings almost intact, minus the effects of being left empty over time. Moving on to other places of note, the Pripyat amusement park was set to have its grand opening on the 1st of May in 1986, in time for the May Day celebrations, but those plans were cancelled on April 26. Several sources report that the park was opened for a short time on the 27th before the announcement to evacuate the city was made to distract the residents from the unfolding disaster nearby. Constructed under the Soviet Union as a park of culture and rest, typical of many large cities in the then Soviet Union, the amusement park's attractions were manufactured by the firm Attraction, who were responsible for the construction of many of the amusement parks which remain to be seen around the former Soviet Union today in various states of repair. Located northwest to the Palace of Culture in the center of Pripyat, the park had 5 attractions: the iconic 26-meter Ferris wheel titled Circular Overview, the Autodrome bumper cars, a paratrooper ride called Chamomile, Russian swing boats, and also a carnival shooting game. Fun fact, the successor to the original company is still manufacturing the Ferris wheel, paratrooper, and bumper cars with a similar design as of 2017. Radiation levels around the park vary. The liquidators washed radiation into the soil after the helicopters carrying radioactive materials used the grounds as a landing strip, so concrete areas are less radioactive. However, areas where moss is built up can emit levels amongst the highest levels of radiation in the whole area. So the Ferris wheel actually made news in September of 2017 when Polish tourists turned it mechanically for the first time since 1986, later returning it to its original position. As much as it would be fascinating to explore history, I'll wait till it's a little less detrimental to my health. Number 4. The Paris Catacombs. Deep underground the city of Paris are hundreds of miles of tunnels in a complex network that is one of the oldest in the world. It's a darker city that few tourists experience due to the high risk of danger. People often get lost. The walls can also collapse at any moment, so many who venture there wear miners' helmets. There's no electricity among the endless winding canals. There's no electricity amongst the endless winding canals, corridors, and crypts filled with mounds of unidentified skulls, which are estimated to be about 6 million deceased Parisians. There are parts so tight that you have to lie on your belly and slither forward like a worm to get through. Only a small section of the catacombs is accessible to tourists, while the rest has been illegal to enter since 1955. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't explore the tourist accessible areas. Heck, I want to visit those myself, but stay out of the illegal areas. Urban explorers who frequent the catacombs call themselves cataphiles, which I must admit is a very smart moniker. They paint, sculpt, and create other art, while also building false walls, trap doors, and secret chutes to keep away the cataflics or catacops who try to catch them trespassing. You must know a cataphile who can be your guide to even try to explore the unknown, or else risk getting lost or stuck for who knows how long. As much as I love exploring creepy history, the thought of getting lost in such a cursed place is a type of scared I'm not fond of, and don't particularly ever want to experience. Number 3. The island of Poveglia. Yep, an entirely abandoned island, and it's got quite the history. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice, and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in all of Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from the island, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick, to prevent the spread of disease, and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yeah, I'll backtrack and elaborate. In 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poveglia, like many other small islands at the time, and it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed 1 out of 3 Europeans, so fearing the crazy spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. Go! At the island center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres. This included the tens of thousands of Venice citizens dying on the mainland. These fires were burned once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. A small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil, so I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented on patients with crude lobotomies and jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he'd been driven mad by ghosts. Decades later, nearby residents claimed to still hear the bell, although it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work has started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation, so maybe this is one spot on today's list that I don't want to visit, ever. Number 2. Bodie State Historic Park. Formerly a genuine gold mining town located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in Mono County, California, and now a national landmark, it is known as one of the best preserved ghost towns in the world. It is named after W.S. Bodie, first name unknown, but rumored to be either William or Waterman, who discovered gold in 1859 in an area now known as Brody Bluff. He tragically passed away in a snowstorm that same winter and was never present for what came to be. According to pioneer Judge McClinton, the district's name was changed from the proper spelling of Bodey to Body, and then a few other phonetic variations to eventually Bodie after a painter in the nearby boomtown of Aurora lettered a sign as such, an accidental typo that got stuck through history, which is a good reminder to proofread your work. While the output from the mine is largely insignificant in terms of mining history, the violence and early endings to lives tell a different story. A particularly harsh winter between 1878 and 79 claimed hundreds of lives, with many others perishing from falling timber and explosions underground. Bodie as a town grew to have a reputation for violence and lawlessness, and unlike other mining camps at the time, killings were daily events. Robberies, stage holdups, and fights happened at such a frequency that no complete record could be kept. Reverend F.M. Warrington would describe the area in 1881 as a sea of sin, lashed by tempests of lust and passion. The first of 4 mysterious fires tore through the business district in 1892, the next destroying the town mill in 1912, and another destroying the same mill again in 1898. The last of the unknown fires demolished most of what was left of the now ghost town in 1932, taking many lives too soon in the process. When the last producing mine shut down after 1945, very few people were left living in what was left of the town, and all eventually met untimely ends. ends. One man shot his wife unprompted, and 3 other men from the town took it upon themselves to take his life for the act. According to historians, the ghost of that man would visit the 3 men after his passing, shaking his fist and appearing as if he was cursing them out. Those men soon died of mysterious diseases and illnesses. Visitors to the area have reported meeting spirits that leave them feeling suffocated, seeing doors open and close on their own, and rocking chairs that may or may not have a menacing older lady staring them down, or even the empty chair rocking on its own. Nowadays, if you remove anything from the land, even like a little pebble, you'll be cursed with remorse and tragedy. The curse is upheld by the ghosts of residents past, who guard against thieves and protect the town's treasures. So kleptos, steer clear or be cursed. Number 1. Plymouth. The Caribbean island of Montserrat was quite the getaway spot in the 1980s after music producer Sir George Martin opened a recording studio there called Air. The appeal of working with his team and spending a few weeks or months recording in a tropical paradise was so compelling that the world's most famous rock stars, had a good time there. We're talking like Mick Jagger, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, and Paul McCartney all laid down tracks. The party sadly ended abruptly when twin disasters struck the island. Beginning on the 18th of July in 1995, a series of huge eruptions at the South Friar Hills volcano, which had been inactive for centuries, sent pyroclastic flows and ash falls across a wide area of southern Montserrat, including the capital of Plymouth. On the 21st of August in 1995, tephra fell on Plymouth, necessitating an evacuation that lasted until September 3rd. Following renewed volcanic activity on the 1st of December, residents were evacuated for the second time, but were allowed back on the 1st of January. On April 3rd, it was evacuated for the third and final time. The island was divided into risk zones. During some periods, entry into Plymouth was prohibited, and at other times it was allowed during daytime only to those with a means of rapid escape. And the last time that access was legally allowed to the area during daytime was June 16th of 1997, which was right before I was born. On the 25th of June, a further massive eruption produced pyroclastic surges that killed 19 people and reached nearly to the island's airport on the eastern side of the island, which had remained open until that time. Between the 4th to the 8th of August of that year, a further series of large eruptions destroyed approximately 80% of the town, burying it under 1.4 meters of ash. This hot material burned many of the buildings, making habitation nearly impossible for many of the residents. The flows, lava, ash, and other volcanic rock types were mostly compact, having a density similar to that of concrete. The removal of the overburden would have required the use of explosives, bulldozers, and other resources way too expensive for all of this. It was anticipated that the soil underneath the hardened mud and lava would have been scorched and left completely non-arable by the intense heat of the pyroclastic flows. The entire south half of the island was declared an exclusion zone because of the continuing volcanic activity at the hills. So the government of the island was moved north to the town of Brady's, although Plymouth still remains the technical capital. Recently, Montserrat has begun chaperoning driving tours into the exclusion zone, where visitors can walk through the ruins of the former capital, which now lies buried under some 20 feet of ash and stone, where the smoking volcano still pumps over 350 tons of sulfur dioxide into the sky every day. During a tour, one sees modern concrete buildings shattered by the unbelievable force of nature. Over 10 feet of ash and mud have buried so much of the city that in certain areas only rooftops poke up from the dust. We're talking like papers and envelopes are stacked on desktop piles of work, which were made pointless by the pile of ash that fills up the floor and outside balconies. 19 people died from breaking the law and entering the exclusion zone before it was safe, by the way. The hot gas cooked their lungs, and they looked similar to mummies when they were eventually found. Yeah, big pass from me.
These haunted, abandoned mines have more than just history behind them. Many paranormal investigators say they're still haunted to this day. Horton Mine in Nevada. Now imagine being 900 feet below ground, surrounded by rock so black it swallows your flashlight's beam, water dripping from the ceiling, and rusted chains swinging gently as if pushed by invisible hands. This is Horton Mine in Nevada, long abandoned, with tunnels originally built to transport ore from the Victorian mine. Now the explorer, venturing into these tunnels, first noticed the water-slicked walls reflecting his faint light. Every step echoed, magnifying the slightest sound, then a chain above him swayed. He froze. There was no wind, no visible cause, only the creaking metal. Moments later, a low whisper rolled through the tunnel saying, "Go now." His heart racing, he spun around only to find the tunnel completely empty. Horton Mine is notoriously dangerous. Many parts of the floor are unstable. Sudden drops are hidden by darkness. Experts say abandoned mines can amplify sounds due to their narrow narrow construction. But multiple explorers repeat hearing clear human-like voices where no one is present. One group even recorded faint clanging as though an old conveyor system had mysteriously sprung to life. What makes Horton Mine terrifying isn't just the dark, unstable tunnels, it's the history. Miners lived and passed away here, often in grueling conditions, and some never left the shafts alive. Could their spirits remain? I mean, witnesses swear the answer is yes. The combination of visual, isolation, eerie acoustics, and the weight of history create a very truly chilling experience. Clearwell Caves in England. Now, the Clearwell Caves in Gloucestershire, England aren't just picturesque old mines, they're steeped in ghost stories. Miners worked these tunnels for centuries, extracting iron ore, and locals say some never left in spirit. One famous account comes from a 1970s film crew. Although no footage exists, many accounts from the crew remain the same. Legend has it that while filming underground, a sudden figure appeared, a miner in old suit-stained clothes, pointing them to a hidden tunnel that offered a safe route. When they turned to thank him, he had vanished. Locals call him the Old Man. The claim has been, he's been seen guiding lost visitors ever since. Now, visitors often report metal clanging, footsteps where no one is visible, and lights flickering inexplicably. Now, the reddish iron ore casts a red-like glow, making shadows appear alive. The tunnels are narrow, kind of labyrinth-like, and many haven't actually been used for decades, which amplifies even the slightest noise into a terrifying echo. Explorers also recount sudden cold spots, like a human presence kind of brushing past them and objects slightly moved from their original position. It's a mine that feels alive yet invisible. Perhaps it's the cumulative memory of, centuries of toil, loss, and demise embedded in the walls. I personally would not want to explore this one, but let me know if you would. The Argonaut Mine in California. Now, Argonaut Mine in Jackson, California is infamous for its 1922 disaster when a fire trapped 47 miners more than 4,600 feet underground. Today, it's actually considered one of the most haunted sites in the American West. Paranormal teams report recording faint whispers and knocks during exploration. Some claim to have captured voices pleading for help, impossibly distant, yet clear enough to send chills down your spine. The tunnels remain mostly sealed and dangerous, but adventurous explorers risk entry for just a glimpse of the eerie silence. The mine's history is honestly pretty brutal. The 1922 fire was devastating. Miners were trapped, some passing away completely alone, cut off from help. The trauma from that disaster seems to linger all the time later. Now, many visitors say that, descending into Argonaut feels like stepping into a temporal echo. The past is present but intangible, a whisper kind of in the dark. Now, some investigators claim that unexplained shadows and temperature drops are commonplace and happen quite frequently. Cameras pick up anomalies in the air like streaks of light or figures in peripheral vision that vanish when looked at directly. The combination of historical tragedy, claustrophobic shafts, and documented EVP activity makes Argonaut Mine a prime example of a haunted abandoned mine, and one, again, that I'll never step foot in. Nova Scotia's coal mine in Cape Breton. Now, the abandoned coal mines of Cape Breton, Nova Scotia are some of the most unnerving underground locations in North America. In the early 1900s, coal was mined here under grueling conditions. The mines eventually closed, leaving behind deserted tunnels, timbers, and machinery, but also legends of lingering miners. Paranormal investigators exploring the mines report hearing pickaxes striking coal where no one is actually present. Shadowy figures are seen fleetingly in the distance, only to vanish, of course, when approached, and the darkness is absolute. Water drips from ceilings, echoing down corridors, and old timbers groan under the weight of years. These mines were not only dangerous for those who worked there, they were isolating and stifling. I mean, the combination of physical danger and psychological stress created an environment where fear could linger long after the mines were closed. Modern explorers feel that same tension as they descend into the coal-filled tunnels. Lights flickering, senses heightened, hearts pounding. It's really not a place you want to visit if you're easily triggered with anxiety. Phoenix Gold Mine in Idaho Springs, Colorado. Now, deep in the Colorado Rockies, the Phoenix Gold Mine sits carved into the side of Trail Creek Canyon, just outside the old mining town of Idaho Springs. Now, once booming during the Colorado Gold Rush of the 1880s, this mine eventually shut down, leaving behind tunnels, rusted carts, and a history steeped in tragedy. But what makes it infamous today isn't its gold, it's the spirits said to still roam its dark veins. Locals say the Phoenix mine has never really gone quiet. Even after the drills stopped, strange sounds continued echoing through the tunnels. When the site reopened as an actual tour location, guides began reporting eerie encounters like cold spots that appeared suddenly. The most chilling reports come from paranormal investigators who've actually spent the night inside. Cameras have captured orbs moving deliberately like they're kind of following someone. One investigator claims her flashlight turned off on command after a voice told her to leave. Another caught an EVP of a woman humming, eerily clear in the glory hole section of the mine, now an area where miners once actually passed away in a collapse over a century ago. What makes the Phoenix gold mine especially unnerving is that it's partially open to the public still. That means ordinary visitors, families, tourists, even skeptics have come out shaken, by what they've seen. Some report feeling sudden nausea or lightheadedness just before hearing a whisper or seeing a shadow. Now, the mine's tragic past feeds, the haunting. During its early years, several miners passed away from cave-ins and gas exposure. Legends say a miner named Tom, crushed by falling rocks, still haunts the entrance, calling out to warn others. Now, investigators from multiple ghost hunting shows have actually filmed inside the Phoenix mine. During one session, equipment recorded spikes in electromagnetic energy just as a voice said, "Still here." In another, a motion sensor went off repeatedly even though the tunnel was empty. After researching these mines, one theme is crystal clear to me. Abandoned mines hold more than rock and rust. Darkness, isolation, water, metal, and the trauma of, demise create environments where the boundary between natural and supernatural blurs. Exploring these mines is more than a physical challenge, it's a psychological journey. When cameras venture where humans rarely go, they capture not just shadows and sound, but a lingering, almost tangible sense of fear. Well, which mine would you explore if you could? Let me know. I'm your host, Ashley. I'll see you next time. Some footage is easy to explain, dust, shadows, camera glitches, but then there's the kind that makes even the bravest investigators run screaming. The kind of footage that police departments hide, that ghost hunters swear they'll never go back to, that makes your body run cold just looking at it. First up, a tale of a town swallowed by the earth, a place where the ground breathes smoke and whispers of a forgotten inferno. I speak of Centralia, Pennsylvania, a ghost town etched in the American landscape, not by war or famine, but by a relentless fire that has burned for over 6 decades. Imagine, if you will, a crisp spring day in the year 1962. Picture a small town, Main Street bustling, children playing, the scent of coal smoke mingling, with the aroma of sweet, sweet apple pie. Centralia then was a thriving coal town, but it was built upon the very resource that would become its curse. Beneath their feet, a labyrinth of coal seems snaked through the earth, a fuel that has powered, industries and warmed homes for generations. But that day, something went terribly wrong. The precise origin remains a little shrouded in mystery, whispered theories of a trash fire, carelessly set by someone, or perhaps a controlled burn gone horribly wrong. Whatever the spark, it ignited a sleeping giant, a vein of coal deep within the earth. And once awakened, this beast proved unstoppable. At first, the signs were very subtle, a wisp of smoke kind of just curling from a crack in the road, a strange kind of sulfurous smell hanging in the air, but soon the cracks widened, steam hissed from, the fissures of the ground, and the temperature of the soil began to rise. Centralia was becoming a furnace. The flames, which were fueled by the endless supply of coal, spread like a wildfire beneath the town. Homes, buckled, foundations cracked, and gases seeped into basements, poisoning the air. The residents of Centralia, their lives intertwined with the coal that now threatened to consume them, were caught in a terrifying dilemma. Should they stay, clinging to their homes, or flee, abandoning everything they knew? Families were torn apart by this impossible choice. Businesses, shuttered, their windows, staring blankly into the smoky haze. The post office was then closed, a symbol of a community just slowly fading away. One by one, houses were swallowed by sinkholes, claimed by this relentless fire. This town was absolutely abandoned in the 1980s due to this coal mine fire that has been burning since the 1960s. Now, despite efforts to extinguish the fire, it continues to burn to this day, making Centralia unlivable and completely uninhabitable. Today, the town is an absolute ghost town, with many of its buildings and streets reclaimed by nature. Centralia stands, as a stark monument to the power of nature, a silent city kind of draped in a very eerie, perpetual fog. Route 61 2021, once a major, thoroughfare, is now basically fully closed. It's like graffiti covered, and honestly, just a very chilling reminder of the town that once was. The air hangs very heavy with the smell of sulfur, which is also just a constant reminder of the fire that burns beneath. Centralia is not just an abandoned town, it's a living ghost. A place where the past refuses to be buried, a warning etched in smoke and ash. Many people want to visit, but it's not recommended, and it's still burning literally like right now. So even I will not recommend it. Like, this is the real Silent Hill, if you can catch that reference. Next up, a place frozen in time, a city cloaked in an eerie silence where the echoes of laughter and the hum of industry have been replaced by the rustling of wind through empty streets. I speak of Pripyat, Ukraine, a ghost city, a stark and haunting reminder of a tragedy that shook the world. Pripyat, once a vibrant, Soviet city, was built to house the workers of the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Now, imagine a city filled with youthful energy, a place where families strolled along, tree-lined boulevards, where children played in brightly colored parks, where the future seemed as bright as the utopian ideals, of the era. A city of nearly 50,000 people, just full of life, promise, and progress. But on April 26, 1986, that promise was shattered. A routine test at the Chernobyl plant, spiraled catastrophically out of control. Reactor number 4 exploded, unleashing a torrent of radiation into the atmosphere. The invisible enemy, absolutely silent, spread like a phantom wind, contaminating literally everything it touched. Within hours, Pripyat, the city of dreams, became a city of dread. The residents, initially unaware of the true danger, went about their daily lives, took their kids to school, went to the library, went to work, did their shopping, etc., oblivious to the invisible poison that was raining down on them. Then the order came: evacuation. A temporary measure, they were told, just for a few days. They packed what they could carry, leaving behind their homes, their belongings, their memories, believing they would soon return, but they never did. Pripyat became a ghost town, a chilling scene of life just interrupted. Time basically just stood still. Honestly, it's really creepy to look at. It's like a scene in a horror movie. Ferris wheels in the amusement park just remain frozen mid-turn, a very unsettling symbol of lost innocence. Dolls lie scattered in abandoned kindergartens, their eyes just staring into the emptiness, and books remain open on desks in deserted schools, juice boxes half drank. I'm really trying to paint you the picture here, but this city is a museum of a bygone era, a snapshot of just Soviet life preserved in a sepia tone nightmare. The silence is deafening. No birds sing, no children laugh, only the wind whispers through the empty buildings, carrying with it the ghosts of the past. The once vibrant streets are now overgrown with weeds, a testament to nature's relentless reclaiming. It is a place where the past refuses to be forgotten, where the air itself seems to buzz with the weight of what happened. It is a place, that reminds us of the fragility of life, like the power of nature and the importance of vigilance. Now, many people want Pripyat to be a lesson, a reminder that progress must never come at the cost of human lives. Today, it's nothing more than a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of the Chernobyl disaster. It's a ghost town, and honestly, to each their own, but I'd be way too spooked to visit. In 2022, Russian troops did actually roam through the deserted city and use the space to actually practice drills, as they used a special radiation control unit which monitored the levels to which the soldiers would be exposed. It's reported that this city has, some of the highest contamination levels. However, it is possible that over time the radiation levels could actually decrease so much that it makes it possible for people to live there again. Keep that in mind if you're looking to move or relocate in the next 50 years. Last step, we have a story of a forgotten island, a place once flooding with life, now a skeletal silhouette against the skyline. I speak of Hashima Island, also known as Battleship Island, a concrete ghost ship, adrift in the East China Sea. Imagine, if you will, a tiny island, barely larger than a city block, transformed into a fortress of industry. From the late 19th century until the mid-20th, Hashima was a coal mining powerhouse, a central figure in Japan's rapid industrialization. Mitsubishi Corporation, the island's owner, built towering concrete structures, apartment blocks, schools, shops, all crammed onto this little small rocky bluff. It was a city at sea, a self-contained world fueled by the very resource it extracted from the earth. Life on Hashima was a very unique and intense experience. Imagine, thousands of people living and working in such close proximity, a tightly knit community bound, by the shared purpose of coal extraction. Miners descended hundreds of meters below the surface, braving dangerous conditions to fuel Japan's growth. Families lived in cramped apartments, children played, on rooftop playgrounds, and the island throbbed with the energy of a boomtown. Hashima, at its peak in the 1950s, housed over 5,000 residents, making it one of the most densely populated, places on Earth. It was a symbol of Japan's resilience, its resourcefulness, and its relentless drive for progress. But this boom was not to last. The mid-20th century actually brought about a shift in energy sources. Coal, which was once king, was dethroned by the rise of oil. The mines on Hashima, once a source of wealth, became less profitable. Mitsubishi, facing declining returns, made the very difficult decision to just close the mines. And so in 1974, Hashima's fate was sealed. The residents who had built their lives on this island were forced to leave, abandoning their homes, their schools, basically their whole community. They left behind a city frozen in time, a concrete jungle slowly being reclaimed by the sea. Hashima became a ghost island, a haunting reminder of just a historic era. The once bustling apartment blocks now stand empty, their windows, staring blankly out at the ocean. The school where children once learned and laughed is now completely silent, its classrooms just filled with dust. The shops where families once bought their groceries are now just empty shelves, completely bare. The island, battered by typhoons and time, began to crumble. The structures, once symbols of strength and progress, became an eerie testament to the decay of human endeavors. Hashima, once a beacon of industry, became a symbol of decline, a constant reminder of the boom and bust cycle of human history. Now today, Hashima, stands as a somber and yet kind of beautiful ruin, a place that draws, photographers, urban explorers, and history enthusiasts from all around the world. It's a place where you can walk through the empty corridors of abandoned buildings, where you can feel the weight of history just hanging in the air, where you can imagine the lives of the people who once called this island home. Hashima is more than just an abandoned island, though. Honestly, it's a time capsule, a reminder of a specific moment in history. It's a story of industry, community, and ultimately abandonment. People want to remember Hashima for its story that deserves to be told, a story that deserves to be remembered. Tourists are allowed to visit if you want to go. However, fishermen who sail near the island claim they have seen strange flickering lights in the buildings, even though the island has no electricity. Stop. The Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts. Now, this abandoned asylum was built in the 19th century and was notorious for its inhumane treatment of patients. The hospital was closed in 1992, but its dark history remains. Experts refused to enter the hospital due to reports of paranormal activity, including ghostly apparitions and unexplained noises. The Denver State Hospital, also known as the Colorado State Hospital, was a psychiatric hospital located in Colorado. Now, the hospital was established in 1890 and operated until its closure in 1974. It was actually built in 1874 and didn't open until 4 years later in 1878. It was designed by a Boston architect named Nathaniel Bradley, and during its operation, the hospital was plagued by reports of patient mistreatment and neglect. It was designed to provide care and treatment for patients with mental illnesses. However, the hospital quickly gained a reputation for its very inhumane treatment of patients. Now, reports of physical and emotional, strain, patient neglect, and experimental treatments were rampant. In the 1950s and 1960s, the hospital was the site of numerous lobotomies. I actually believe it's the first hospital to perform one, and a lobotomy is a surgical procedure that involves severing or scraping away parts of the brain. Many patients who underwent this procedure were left with severe cognitive and emotional impairments. Now, Denver's quickly became notorious for its overcrowding, with almost 4 times as many patients as the hospital was actually designed to house. Patients sometimes passed away out of, sight, out of the staff, and their bodies decomposed for days before they were even noticed missing. A lack of funding and staff meant that by 1926, there was a population of over 2,000 people, causing, special garments to be used to control the patients. Well, these special garments were basically just straitjackets, which would have been used as just a means of control. One of the worst recorded cases at the frequently underfunded site was when in 1987, patient Ann Houghton walked out of the hospital only to be found passed away the next day from a heart attack. The Denver State Hospital hospital is also said to be one of the most haunted places in Colorado. Former patients, staff, and visitors have actually reported numerous paranormal occurrences, including ghostly apparitions and phantom voices, unexplained noises such as screams and whispers and footsteps, doors opening and closing on their own, lights flickering and going out, cold spots and drafts, and very, other unexplainable things. Many believe that the hospital's dark history and the trauma experienced by patients have led to the paranormal activity. Now, due to the hospital's notorious history and the numerous reports of these unexplained occurrences, many experts and paranormal investigators are very hesitant to enter the building, rightfully so. Some of the reasons, many have said they won't is because they have a fear, first off, of physical harm. The hospital's abandoned and decaying state makes it a hazardous, environment. Experts may be concerned also about the risk of injury from these falling debris, broken glass, or other hazards. There's also a great fear of psychological trauma. The hospital's grim legacy and the trauma experienced by patients may have left a lasting psychological impact on the building itself. Experts may be concerned about the potential for psychological trauma or emotional distress. Another noted reason is just respect for the deceased. Many experts and paranormal investigators believe that the hospital is a place of great sadness and tragedy. They may be hesitant, to enter the building out of respect for the patients who suffered and passed on there. This hospital is such a pop culture horror icon, no doubt, and it's a mecca for paranormal enthusiasts. Most of the building, was demolished by 2007, so unfortunately, if you were tempted to go visit, you may have to reconsider. Or if you're looking to move, you can buy a condo that's now there. Next, we have the Island of the Dolls in Mexico. This small island is home to hundreds of creepy dolls hanging from trees and scattered throughout the island. The island's former owner, Julian Santana, claimed that the dolls were actually possessed by the spirits of young girls who had passed away on the island. The legend states that, Julian found a young girl's body floating in the canal and believing the doll he later found was actually hers, so he hung it from a tree as a tribute and to protect himself from her spirit. Now, legend has it that Julian claimed to have heard the girl screaming from beyond the grave, saying, "I want my doll." Barrera began to hang a lot of dolls from the trees on the island, believing that they would help to ward off evil spirits and calm the restless spirit of the young girl. Now, over time, the number of dolls on the island grew dramatically. He would hang damaged dolls that were missing limbs, missing eyeballs, and just looked really creepy and very disturbing. It's reported that he would collect them from the trash and even traded things for them, like vegetables and other food items, things that he would obviously need to eat in order to survive. So clearly something was off with his mental state, right? Now, he did this for over 50 years. This became quite an obsession for him, to say the least, and they became a source, of fascination and terror for locals and visitors alike. It's actually the world's largest collection of haunted dolls, if you can believe that. Now, Julian actually passed away in 2001, and wait for it, he was found very close to the spot where the young girl had passed. That's creepy, right? Now, some have suggested that he met the same fate as her, and drowned, while others say that he likely just had a heart attack and happened to be there. Now, regardless, many believe his passing was caused by the girl's spirit, which allegedly still haunts the island to this day. Experts refuse to enter the island due to its very eerie atmosphere and reports of strange occurrences. Now, the Island of the Dolls is said to be one of the most haunted places in Mexico, so go if you want. Now, visitors have reported a range of paranormal activity, with locals claiming that the dolls come to life at night, and they say that, the dolls whisper and whistle and move their limbs and turn their heads on their own. So many unexplained just noises and things happening, such as soft giggles and laughter they hear. Many people have also said that they have that feeling, of just being watched or followed. Now, due to the island's dark history and the numerous reports of paranormal activity, experts and paranormal investigators are really hesitant to just even go on the island. Some have a fear of physical harm, but it's mainly the fear of psychological trauma. The island's creepy atmosphere, the sight of just hundreds of dolls hanging from the trees can be very traumatic for some visitors. A lot of people have said they won't visit for the simple fact that they want to have respect for those who passed on, and many experts believe that the island is a place of great sadness and tragedy, and they may be hesitant to enter the island just again out of respect. Now, many have said if you do visit, it's very wise to offer the dolls a gift as soon as you you set foot on the island. What that can be, I don't know. That's up to you, but there's many concerns about the island's history. You know, some experts, of course, may be concerned about the accuracy also of the island's history and the stories that surround it. Now, in recent years, the island has become a very popular tourist destination. Many visitors drawn to its creepy, atmosphere and paranormal reputation. However, experts and investigators do still remain cautious, and many just refuse to go in, due to its troubling past and reputation. A lot of vloggers have actually gone and documented their time there. So if you're too scared to go visit in person yourself, you can comfortably sit on your couch or your bed and watch it on your phone or laptop. Last up for you, I have Varosha Beach, located in Famagusta, Cyprus. Now, this was a once thriving beach resort that has been abandoned and untouched since like the 1970s. It was actually considered a very glamorous Mediterranean resort destination. Anyone was there, basically. The beach is a poignant, reminder of just the island's tumultuous past and the ongoing conflict between Greece and Turkey. Varosha Beach, believe it or not, was once the most popular tourist destination, attracting visitors from literally all over the world, including a lot of celebrities. The beach was known for its pristine waters, golden sand, and very vibrant nightlife. However, in 1974, the Turkish military invaded Cyprus, and the beach was basically abandoned like overnight. The Turkish military took control of the beach and the surrounding area, declaring it a military zone. The beach was fenced off and access was restricted. The once thriving resort was left to decay, with buildings crumbling and vegetation, overgrowing the streets. The town is basically completely off limits and guarded by the military. However, in 2020, some roads and some parts of the beach were actually opened up to tourists, but the beach is a ghost town with buildings standing completely empty and decaying. The streets are just, again, overgrown with vegetation, and the once pristine beach is littered with debris. Now, despite it being somewhat available to enter, even experts aren't rushing to head over. Due to the beach's history and current state, many experts and researchers are very hesitant to just enter the area because of the military restrictions. The beach is still a military zone and access to certain parts is still restricted, so what's the point? But experts may not be able to obtain permission to enter these restricted areas, so again, they don't really feel the need. There's also safety concerns. The beach is in a state of disrepair with buildings that are unstable and basically falling over, and experts may be concerned also about the risk of injury or accident because of that. Now, there's also preservation concerns. The beach is a unique and important historical site. Experts may be concerned about the potential disruption of the site and the loss of historical artifacts. Some have also said they won't enter because of political sensitivities. The beach is a very sensitive topic in the ongoing conflict between Greece and Turkey. Experts may be hesitant to enter the area due to concerns about the political repercussions. Now, some claims of it being haunted have also circulated. Stories of it being taken over by spirits have circulated, which has made even the most daring person very hesitant to give it a visit. These super creepy abandoned places have been hiding evil secrets for decades. The Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, located in West Virginia, the Trans Lunatic Asylum operated from 1864 to 1994. This hospital was designed to treat patients with innovative architectural features such as large windows and plenty of natural light. However, the hospital's history is marred by reports of patient mistreatment, neglect, and experimentation. Many patients were subjected to inhumane treatments, including lobotomies and other forms of torment. Today, the asylum is said to be haunted by the spirits of former patients, and paranormal investigators have captured evidence of unexplained phenomena. Now, in 2007, it was privately purchased and has become a museum/historic location and ghost hunting spot. It has a most unpleasant and dark history, and one person on Reddit actually shared their experience as a guide for the asylum. They wrote about their experience basically saying that in 2001, I retired from my position as a guide and ghost hunt event manager under severe burnout. After all that I experienced there, it solidified in my mind that paranormal things that defy rational explanation do indeed happen, and certain phenomena are absolutely real. They went on to share a couple of strange things that they experienced in their time there. In their words, they said, one evening while training for the job, I was on the first floor with a couple coworkers while everyone else was touring upstairs. We were just kind of killing time, quietly observing the area. Lights from outside was coming in through the windows, casting on the inner hall's wall. Now, in that light, I watched the perfect silhouette of a man from head to toe walk through that light from left to right. I said something about it, and the three of us watched as an arm and hand moved into into the light from the right side. I immediately ran into the room and began looking out the window for someone outside. There was no one there. At that time, the realization that from the ground to the bottom of the window is like 7 feet. It didn't even occur to me. I will never forget the crisp, clear silhouette shape for as long as I live. Spooky. This is one place I don't think I have any interest in visiting anytime soon. The Central State Hospital. In Indiana, the Central State Hospital was once a sprawling complex of buildings that housed thousands of patients. Now, the hospital was notorious for its overcrowding, poor conditions, and experimental treatments. One of the most disturbing practices was the use of lobotomies, which were performed on patients as young as 12 years old. The hospital's dark history has led to numerous reports of paranormal activity, including ghostly apparitions and unexplained noises. Now, the story begins after the Civil War at the Howard's Grove Freeman Hospital, created for or from a former Confederate hospital in 1868. Now, in 1882, a 300-acre farm called the Mayfield Farm in Dinwiddie County was purchased and upgraded to open as the new Central Lunatic Asylum. Over 400 patients were transferred from Howard's Grove to the new asylum, with over another 100 others on a wait list, basically. Now, the asylum was the only one to cater exclusively to African Americans in the entire state. In 1894, legislation was created to change the image of these hospitals, so the Central Lunatic Asylum became Central State Hospital, or just Central State. Now, politicians hoped the name change would evoke positive feelings towards these facilities, patients, and medical staff, but by the 1950s, the hospital had reached its maximum capacity with over 4,800 patients. Over 80 buildings on the campus and another 200 acres had been bought, so Central State Hospital was essentially a small city at this point. Spooky abandoned asylums are always haunted, right? Well, it seems like Central State is just no different. While there are no named ghosts, there are plenty of stories from patients and staff about objects moving, lights flickering, and shadow people running around campus. There are even stories from police officers who have seen and heard things. Moans, wails, screams, and cries are said to echo around the crumbling buildings in the dead of the night. Plants like ivy and trees grow up and through the abandoned buildings. It's a creepy sight to behold. There's a cemetery on the campus filled with nameless graves. Pripyat, Ukraine, the ghost town of Chernobyl. Now, Pripyat was once a thriving city built for workers of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. On April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 exploded, releasing radioactive material into the air. Now, the city was evacuated on April 27, 1986, one day after the Chernobyl disaster. The residents were told, it was just a precautionary evacuation. However, they never returned, and today nature is taking it back. Trees basically grow through apartments, schools still have toys and lesson plans frozen in time. Picture books, children's dolls, and hundreds of gas masks are among the personal items that are actually left behind in this ghost town, which paint a very, eerie picture of all that remains of a community that was once 50,000 people strong. But darker stories persist. Visitors report hearing disembodied voices, counters of spiking in empty rooms, and also the black bird of Chernobyl, which is said to be a winged creature that's said to have appeared before the explosion, possibly, a harbinger of demise. Now, the real horror, though, is the Soviet cover-up, the delay in evacuation, the silencing of whistleblowers. It wasn't just radiation that poisoned the people, but secrets. Urban explorer Adam Mark from Denbighshire in Wales, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, visited the exclusion zone just a few days ago and recorded new footage of the city, which appears to have been frozen in time. Now, haunting snaps include a nursery with rows of cots, mattresses, and dolls still eerily in place, whilst other photographers or other photographs show thousands of gas masks just lying abandoned on the floor, and the theme park rides, which are now being swallowed up by nature. Everyday objects such as toys, books, even medicine bottles can still be seen, as residents were told they would be able to return home in like 3 days. Yet, almost 40 years later, the Soviet town still lies completely abandoned. Adam actually said, you aren't supposed to go there at all because it's just so dangerous. The buildings are unstable and the floors are seriously dodgy. It was all pretty eerie and quite sad, really. But the most fascinating building for him was the morgue. There were untouched jars full of liquid in there, perfectly preserved. Now, the city remains abandoned today, a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of human error. The city's abandoned abandoned buildings, schools, and hospitals are a testament to the lives that were disrupted and destroyed. Many believe that the city's radiation-contaminated environment has led to very strange and unexplained phenomena, including glowing anomalies and unexplained radiation readings. Poveglia Island in Venice, Italy, or better known as the gateway to hell. When it comes to this island, it's a little hard to tell what is true and what is made up, as many suspicions and tales surround the island. Poveglia comprises a group of 3 islands, with 2 being naturally formed and the 3rd resembling Venice through the use of wooden pillars and layers of earth. Now, one island is entirely vegetation, the other houses the main buildings, and finally the smallest is an octagon used as a small fort to protect the island and act as a fort before reaching Venice. Now, the island first welcomed inhabitants in the 7th century, and throughout the following years it grew into a peaceful little community that avoided invasions occurring on the mainland and other stuff. By avoiding the mainland, they also were lucky enough to avoid taxes, creating a very happy community, as you can imagine. They would often trade with nearby, people, just mostly avoided the Italian peninsula. Now, this tiny island in the Venetian lagoon is known as one of the most haunted places in the world. In the 1700s, it was used to quarantine plague victims, literally dumping grounds for the recently passed on. Now, later in the 20th century, it became a psychiatric hospital. According to legend, a doctor there experimented on patients performing crude lobotomies. He later threw himself, or was thrown, that's kind of unclear, off the hospital bell tower, claiming he was haunted by the souls that he tormented. You'll find Poveglia floating off the southwest end of Lido di Venezia. Now, today the island only hosts a few small buildings on the main island, which is entirely abandoned. It's now completely off limits to visitors, so you can't go. Fishermen avoid its waters, locals won't even sail near it. Historians estimate over 100,000 people passed away in Poveglia. Now, some say the soil is basically 50% human ash. At least that is one of the rumors floating around. Now, with all the victims of the plague, the hospital didn't know how to get rid of the bodies, so they just decided to burn them. This isn't just an abandoned island, it's a mass grave. It's tough to say which version of the story might be creepier, seeing the abandoned land and the destroyed structures. You can't help but feel the weight of the patients who live there and contemplate the sad stories of the island. Which abandoned location would you want to visit if you could? Let me know. I'm your host Ashley. Until next time, stay scared. These terrifying evil forests and parks are responsible for the disappearances of thousands of people. Here are their stories. The Black Forest in Germany. A photograph purportedly showing Germany's Black Forest is frequently circulated on social media, along with the claim that the wooded area caused 15,000 missing persons cases last year. While some people have challenged the picture and said it's fake news, others have openly discussed the topic and argued that there may be a lot of truth to it, because it's been alleged that an unusually high number of people have in fact gone missing there. The Black Forest in Germany is known for its dense woodlands, picturesque landscapes, and folklore, but it has also been associated with various disappearances over the years that have basically turned into cold cases. While some stories and legends highlight mysterious cases, the region is not particularly notorious for ongoing disappearances.